This is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to real events or persons is purely coincidental. This story is purely fictional and does not promote or encourage any form of violence. Suggestions on how to get the information, how to combat the new threat, or how to modify their own offensive plans. Tyler even thought he heard someone say they should abandon the offensive. All of it didn't matter, so he took control. When he stood, everyone sat down and turned their attention to him. He waited until it was quiet. "Thank you, officer," he started. "Lieri, sir," the man humbly finished. "Yes, Lieri." Tyler was relieved for the reminder. "We thank you for this important bit of intelligence." Tyler watched as everyone around the room waited for him to express his opinions and give them direction. "I know Marshal Tryon is analyzing this intelligence and will undoubtedly provide each member of the Commission with a full 290 Admiral's Ghost report. After receiving that report, you should quickly provide your own analysis with an impact statement for your area. I assume Admiral Thiessen has been briefed, and that this information will eventually circulate throughout our field commands. Until then, we will wait patiently and hope additional intelligence can be ascertained to help answer the questions we have." Tyler turned to Officer Sloss. "Anything else?" "No, sir," she responded crisply. "Very well. Meeting adjourned." With that, Tyler left the room, avoiding the questions his fellow commissioners were dying to ask. He knew they would wonder whether this intelligence would force them to abandon the offensive. Tyler knew the answer to those questions, but he wasn't about to share them with anyone. He hurried down the corridor towards his office, concerned about the information coming to light. If they believed it to be true, they would likely recommend an indefinite hold on the offensive until they could ascertain the real threat. Tyler thought about Skrilt-treated hulls and realized Pulto would not survive the offensive. Unfortunately, if the Emperor did not concede, they would learn, too soon, the truth behind this intelligence. Tyler wondered how it was gathered. It was just the kind of information that would make the current situation more dangerous and precarious. It was as if someone were constantly putting Tyler into a corner. Initially, he had wanted the offensive to be scrapped, but now he needed it to attain his new goals, and this new information could prevent that. If the intelligence stalled the effort, Tyler wouldn't have a report to deliver. Therefore, his meeting with the Emperor would only be to transfer power to Admiral Thiessen. If that occurred, it would be hard to synchronize the situation with the peace ship. Worse, Admiral Thiessen could use this threat to demand the power transfer happen immediately. Tyler could understand the Emperor readily agreeing. That would be a disaster and could destroy the peace efforts completely. In that case, Krilden would be forced to attack, and Pulto would likely be vanquished. Tyler's mood deepened. The Admiral's soliloquy. 291. Tyler finally caught up with the Marshal, who excused his absence because of the new intelligence. He'd received it through sources shortly before the Commission, and spent the rest of the time performing analysis and defining ramifications. As usual, his network worked diligently to provide the latest up-to-date information. Unfortunately, Tyler suspected most of that intelligence was being fed to them by Nayland, the Imperial Palace, or both. He didn't tell the Marshal about these suspicions. For Tyler, the only thing that mattered was the timing of the peace ship. Now that information about new weapons was confirmed, Pulto had no alternatives but to accept peace or face obliteration. The Imperial Palace pushed aside the new intelligence, claiming it was propaganda generated by the enemy to stall new offensives until their strength was increased. Tyler was incredulous at the palace's reaction, even though it fit neatly into a pattern of someone who wanted a disastrous conclusion. Till now, the marshal hadn't delivered any information concerning near-death experiences for the suspects. Tyler didn't push the matter, since Marshal Sluss had become so suspicious. Adani believed the marshal's loyalties were unfaltering, but Tyler no longer shared that belief. He knew if the marshal sniffed even a faint possibility of betrayal, he would do anything within his power to stop it. Tyler played it easy with the marshal, hoping their plan would unfurl without further complications. Tyler found it difficult to be deceptive, and felt enormous guilt because of it. The marshal was a good man, and deserved better. The final intelligence report still contained holes that fed opponents the necessary leverage to discredit it. Fortunately, this was the one time where Tyler was on the side of those opposing the intelligence. He recognized it was in his best interests to allow the rebuke, and refused to take a position on either side. Let the stalemate continue. The commission was evenly split between those who wanted to scrap the offensive and those who continued to support it. Tyler remained uncommitted and kept re-emphasizing. The commission's job was to ascertain Pulto's readiness rather than determine whether the offensive was warranted based on the latest intelligence. To support this position, he ordered the commissioners to shelve the debate and focus energies on the task at hand. 292 Admiral's Ghost. There were murmurs of dissent, but they begrudgingly agreed to set aside the issue and continue their original charter. Tyler was relieved to divert their attention, if only temporarily, but his actions had created even greater suspicions in the marshal. The marshal viewed the new intelligence as a perfect opportunity to stall the offensive, as originally planned. Many military personnel that supported the admiral in the beginning now asked why he would not take a position on the issue. Support in the commission was faltering, and the marshal was confused. Tyler knew it soon wouldn't matter, so he tried his best to quell the marshal's suspicions and calm the concerns of the commission. When pressed on the issue, Tyler let loose his most imperious admiral and refocused the staff on determining military readiness. Tyler even avoided meetings that didn't demand his presence. He knew he was walking a thin line, but time was running out, and he had to keep them focused on the offensive. Only the palace and Admiral Thiessen seemed thrilled by his uncommitted approach. It disturbed Tyler to make them happy, but he had his mission. His desire to stay away from the inner workings of the commission forced him to accept a dinner invitation to his in-laws in Banir. Their estate outside the capital was located within one of the rich suburbs of Yuso. He did not look forward to the questioning from his father-in-law on details of the commission, especially the reaction to the weapons intelligence. Tyler already knew the intelligence and the palace reaction were being met with skepticism on the Supreme Council, so he was prepared for lengthy discussions. The distance to Banir required Tyler to make the journey by air. Fortunately, he had access to military transports within the Supreme Military Command Complex, and easily secured a small 4-person transport to the outskirts of the city. Once in Banir, it was a short ride by ground car to the councilor's estate. As the car pulled in, Tyler prepared himself for an interesting evening. He didn't like that Tuzia could not accompany him, so he looked forward to an uncomfortable and awkward evening. He felt inadequately prepared to handle questions about Tuzia. It was one thing to hide information from a distance, but in person it became very difficult. He hoped their conversations with Tuzia were adequate to ease their suspicions. They were surely the Admiral's soliloquy 293, concerned for their daughter's safety, especially when she was pregnant with their grandchild. One of the many attendants opened the door for Tyler, welcoming him to the counselor's modest home. Modest was not how Tyler would have described it. It was an extravagant mansion, but Tyler thanked him anyway. Like everything else in Yuso, the estate was lavish. In the front courtyard, an enormous fountain of water danced among intricately carved statues. It flaunted their wealth by wasting one of the most precious resources on the planet. Tyler felt slightly ill, but quickly remembered the Admiral was also one of the wealthiest people on the planet. He followed the attendant across the courtyard and into one of several entrances to the main building. If the Admiral's memories served, the entrance they entered was reserved for family and intimate friends. It was not the main entrance intended for formal affairs. This one led to a small portion of the building that was private and felt more like a real home. Tyler thanked the attendant and assured him he could find the rest of the way on his own. He headed down the corridor to where he knew they would be eating. Along the way, he passed the kitchen where the staff busily readied dinner. He turned left down one more corridor before ending at an open archway. This led into a large and cozy room complete with dining table and living area. The room was empty, but a fire burned gently in the hearth against the back wall. That told Tyler he'd found the right place. He walked to the small bar next to the hearth and poured a large glass of brandy. He needed to steady himself if he was to make it through the evening, and what better way than alcohol? He settled down with his drink in one of several comfortable chairs. As he waited, he surveyed the room, comparing it with the Admiral's memories. The Admiral had not been in the room for many years, and Tuosia's mother had clearly redecorated since that previous visit. The Admiral's memories painted a picture of a room much more elegant and formal. Now, the room was filled with brighter colors and a more contemporary style. The furnishings were comfortable, but the fabrics and styles blended with the new decor, giving the room a feeling of space. Along the right wall, bookcases were replaced with fine art depicting scenes of Pulto. Around the rest of the room, paintings of plants and flowers hung on the wall, lending a more natural feel. 294 Admiral's Ghost, Tyler approved, even though it felt distinctly feminine. Tyler figured it was where Tuosia and her mother had spent their time. Since drifting away from the Admiral, Tuosia had spent more time with her mother than before. "Ah, there you are, Naylan." Tuosia's mother came strolling into the room. "I hope your journey was well." "Yes," Tyler confirmed before getting up from his seat. "May I get you something to drink, Torian?" "Yes, thank you," she replied as she took a seat on the couch. "I'll take a glass of the white wine, if you please." She smiled broadly as he nodded and moved towards the bar. "Haerty will join us soon," she assured. Tyler didn't look forward to talking with the counselor, but at least Tuosia's mother seemed in good spirits. He handed her the wine and took his seat. "Have you spoken with Tuosia recently?" Tyler asked to break the ice. Best to get this out of the way early. Torian took a sip from her wine before responding. "Yes, in fact, I just spoke with her." And Tyler was surprised, but hopeful the conversation would quell doubts or concerns they had. "Oh, good. It has been a day since I last spoke with her," Tyler admitted. "Is everything okay?" "Oh, yes," she said. "She is fine, and looking forward to her return." Tyler knew that she was scheduled to return in several days, but thought that it might be longer depending on how things played out. He hated having her so far away, but he believed she was safer on Sirnin than in the capital. "Yes, I too look forward to her return." Tyler was sincere, but hoped he would still be alive to see it. Torian smiled tightly and agreed with a nod before sipping more of her wine. They sat in silence for several minutes, neither wanting to break it with small talk. Finally, Tuosia's father entered, a smile on his face as he walked towards Tyler. "Welcome, Naylan," the counselor greeted him. "We are so happy you could join us despite your schedule." "I'm honored, counselor. Thank you for inviting me." Naylan bowed formally. The Admiral's Soliloquy 295. "Please, Naylan, call me Hirti," the counselor pleaded. "After all these years, I hope we can set aside the trappings of our positions while in the privacy of our homes." With Hirti's light mood, Tyler thought the evening was shaping up to be okay. "Sorry, Hirti," Tyler replied graciously. "It is often difficult to step out of character, if even for an evening." "Yes," Hirti said jovially. "I hope you don't insist on Tusia calling you Admiral." They laughed lightly, and Tyler relaxed, the brandy taking effect. Tyler offered the counselor a drink, but Hirti declined as dinner was about to commence. They took their seats around the small table, the counselor at the head, and Tyler and Taurine on either side. They enjoyed many courses interspersed with light conversation about the Supreme Council, the local politics in Banir, and the rising cost of property taxes outside the capital. Tyler was happy for the casual conversation and fine food. The meal was a delicious assortment of fresh fruits, vegetables, and meats served with several bottles of wine. Despite his reservations, Tyler enjoyed himself. It was a great relief from the pressures he was under. They finished the last of their meal, and the counselor instructed his staff to hold the dessert until later. The staff acquiesced as they cleared the table of dishes. Tyler was full and slightly drunk as he moved to a comfortable chair. He sat back with a fresh brandy and smiled at his in-laws. "A fabulous dinner, Taurine," he said. "Please, thank your staff for me." "Thank you, Naylan. I shall," she said quietly. The last of the attendants finished clearing and walked out of the room, closing the recessed doors behind them. As though waiting for the privacy, the counselor spoke directly to Tyler. "Now that we are alone, we can discuss a matter of great importance that affects you and Tusia." The statement caught Tyler off guard, and his earlier feelings of unease returned. "I see," he said. "Is that why you invited me here?" "Yes." Hirti's response was flat. "Fine." Tyler prepared himself. "What is it?" 296 Admiral's ghost. The counselor stole a quick glance at his wife before he began. Tyler could only speculate what it was about, but he assumed their concern for Tusia's safety was their number one issue. "Well," Hirti began, "I am sure you are aware that we are concerned about Tusia and her safety, especially since she is pregnant." Tyler nodded, relieved his assumptions were correct. "Well," the counselor hesitated, "we have spoken with her at great length, and she has tried to calm us by convincing us she is looking after family interests." Okay, Tyler thought. So far, so good, although it seemed like they weren't buying the cover story. I looked into this and discovered your family does not have any off-world interests to be looked after. The only off-world investments you own are stocks in companies that are supplied by several mining operations. That does not warrant a visit, let alone an extended stay. The counselor paused, and Tyler tried to hold his panic down. They had looked into his investments. Their concern for their daughter was extreme, and they were willing to do anything to protect her. Tyler remained calm, not wanting to respond until he had heard everything. Hirti paused as though waiting for a response, but continued when Tyler remained silent. "Of course, we confronted Tusia with this information, and although she was angry at our prying, she finally confessed." Tyler was now very alert. What did he mean, confess? What did Tusia tell them? She wouldn't have told them the truth, would she? Tyler wasn't certain. He had to admit he really didn't know her that well. so he remained quiet. Hirti took a drink and sat back. "Naylan," he began, "I have to tell you that despite the pregnancy and the apparent change in you, we are still concerned about your relationship with Tusia." The statement stung, but he couldn't blame them after the Admiral's years of abandonment. During that time, they were certain the relationship was over, especially after they knew about the Admiral's affair. Apparently, even Tusia couldn't change their attitudes about the Admiral. Tyler wondered how he could. "Naylan," Torian broke in, "she has told us everything." Everything. Tyler tried not to show his surprise or fear. He noticed Hirti looked at his wife, annoyed that she had cut to the chase. The Admiral's soliloquy, 297. "Yes," Hirti agreed. "She has told us everything." What do you mean everything?" Tyler asked, hoping that it was not everything. "She told us about your meeting with the governor," Hirti replied calmly. "And your father." He emphasized the last statement, confirming Tyler's fears. She had told them everything, and now they felt they had the opportunity to end the relationship they did not approve of. With one call, they could destroy the conspiracy and threaten the life of their daughter. Tyler wasn't sure how to respond. "I see," he started. "And what do you intend on doing?" He feared the worst and was ready to warn them about Tusia being used as a pawn. "We don't know as yet. That is why we wanted to talk with you." Tyler sensed Hirti was telling the truth, so he had to play his cards just right to survive this new crisis. "Fair enough," Tyler responded, trying to keep the fear out of his voice. "But I must warn you, Tusia's safety will be determined by what you decide." Tyler had to warn them. They had to know what they were up against. They both stole glances at the other, apparently trying to decide who should respond. Finally, Torian spoke up. "We already know about Naylan. She as much as told us that she was a guest without her consent. However, we agreed with her that her place is here with her family, so we paid to have her rescued and brought home." "What?" Tyler was stunned. They had rescued her. A part of him was happy that she was out of their control, but he feared the repercussions of their meddling. What would Naylan do when he found out? Would he send a message to the Admiral, perhaps a transport accident on her way home? Fear gripped him. "Do you know who you are dealing with?" Tyler demanded, the anger in his voice rising. "These people are capable of anything and know nearly everything that happens. I have seen it demonstrated. Naylan Hoos is not a man to cross." Despite his outburst, both remained calm. This made Tyler only angrier. The counselor waited for Tyler to finish his tirade. He finally stopped, having nothing more to say. He sat down, fuming. Tusia was definitely in danger, especially if she came back to the capital. "Don't worry, Naylan. She is safe," the counselor assured. 298 about Admiral's ghost. "Really?" Tyler said bitterly. "You don't know Naylan like I do. You don't know what he is capable of." Hirti furrowed his brows. "Nonsense, I know Mr. Hoos, or people like him. They want only one thing, power." "Yes, so what makes you think he won't harm Tusia?" Hirti's expression became flat. "Simple. He assured me he wouldn't." "What?" Tyler was outraged. "You spoke with him?" "Yes. It was Hoos I paid to have Tusia released." Tyler couldn't believe what he was hearing. They had paid Naylan to release their daughter and guarantee her safety. It couldn't be. Why would Naylan take money to release her? He was already rich beyond measure. Why would money motivate him? "Great," Tyler began. "And now you suppose paying him money is enough to secure her safety and yours? I doubt you have enough money to interest him." "True enough," Hirti conceded. "But money is not all I have to offer." He paused. I offered him power, or rather what little I have in the council. Tyler couldn't believe what he was hearing. Everything was being blown out of proportion. Now Tuzia's father agreed to compromise his professional integrity when all he had to do was wait. Tyler was certain everything was going to end badly. Too much was unraveling, and soon it would be impossible to keep under wraps. "So, I suppose Nayland knows you know about the peace ship?" Tyler asked, sounding more than exasperated. "Of course," the counselor admitted. "At first I tried to play it off as though I didn't know everything, but he had a recording of my conversation with Tuzia." Tyler groaned. They were all part of the conspiracy now, and regardless of what happened, they would not likely survive. "So what did you promise him?" Tyler asked. "I promised that if their plan succeeded, I would support the new government and help win the council to their side, to embrace the new peace. And if it does not succeed, what then? My child spends the rest of their life without parents or grandparents." Tyler knew his last comment upset them, but he no longer cared. The Admiral's soliloquy, 299. Here T looked straight at Tyler, a serious demeanor consuming his expression. "Yes, Nayland, that is what might happen if they do not succeed. But it is your traitorous behavior that will orphan your only child, so you better make sure their plan succeeds. At least then our grandchild might have a family and life in a peaceful world. You brought this upon us, so you better make sure we survive." Tyler had never seen Tuzia's father so angry. His own anger cooled from the display. He hadn't had a choice becoming a traitor, but he was the one that had precipitated the events. If he would have just left everything alone, not been curious when he came across the listing flagship, then maybe the Admiral would have just died and none of this would have happened. Adani broke into his reverie uninvited. Sure, and then the Admiral would not have given his wife the child she always wanted. The Emperor would not have any opposition to his destructive plans, and the planet would have been plunged into a final battle that would have spelled the end to this world. "Shut up! No one asked you." Tyler vented his anger inward, even though he knew the alien was right. It was as though fate had determined this world would be thrown into chaos, and only Tyler had the slimmest chance to thwart it. "I didn't have any choice, Counselor," he said without force. "Maybe you did, maybe didn't. Either way, you have the power to make it come out right, even if it kills you. And I mean that literally, Nayland. When the time comes, you better make the right choices and not sacrifice us to save your own skin. If that time comes, you better act the officer you've always been and meet your doom with integrity. It is the very least you owe your child." Tyler could tell what kind of ending they were hoping for. Even if he survived, his relationship with his in-laws was over. They would do their best to convince their daughter to end it. Considering what the Emperor was capable of doing, Tyler admitted his odds of surviving were not euphoric state. "Why is Tuzia coming here?" Tyler asked, once again worried for her safety. "She is not," Torny replied softly. "We are both meeting her at one of my family's properties in the Circe province." "When are you leaving?" Tyler asked. "Tonight," Hirti admitted. "After you return to the capital." 300 Admirals ghost. Tyler thought about that. At least they would be far from the capital. It might not matter if everything failed, but at least it was a temporary reprieve. Tyler felt sorry he would not be able to see her before it ended. He missed her and wanted to feel her touch once more. His love for her had grown strong, even stronger than his love for Linda. But he was not going to have a chance to show her that love. He would only be able to communicate it when they next spoke. If they spoke. Tyler stood. "I see. Then I will let you get on with your travel arrangements." He moved to leave, pressured by concern for their safety. Travel accidents were not uncommon, and Tyler was certain Nayland could easily arrange one. He hoped the counselor's promise of support was enough to guarantee their safety. At least Tusia seemed safe, for the moment. As he turned to leave, Torian stopped him. "Nayland." She paused as though what she had to say was difficult. "I know you will do the right thing for your family and your world." He smiled weakly at the thin vote of confidence. He didn't share her optimism. He glanced briefly at the counselor, who stared back defiantly. "Good luck, sir. Please take care of my wife and child." The counselor didn't respond, so Tyler nodded to Torian before heading back into the courtyard. As the ground car pulled away from the Slay estate, Tyler sat quietly thinking about the fate that awaited him. When he arrived back in the capital, 2 urgent messages waited for him. He hoped one would be from the marshal with the information he needed to find the Onyelum. He felt utterly helpless and yearned for something he could pursue to improve his odds. Unfortunately, neither message was from the marshal. The first carried the imperial seal of the office of Regent Sneered. Tyler opened it with dread. As feared, the palace had set the date and time for the turnover of the command codes. At this point, Tyler had no reason to delay, so he sent his acceptance. Now he needed to contact Nayland and let them know the date and time. As if by coincidence, the next message was from Nayland, using the highest security encryption the military had. Tyler knew the Admiral's soliloquy 3:00. It wasn't coincidence. Nayland had access to nearly everything in the Imperial Palace, so finding the date and time of the turnover would have been easy. Tyler opened the message. "Date and time acceptable. Package arriving. Where contents to meeting. Your family and planet are depending on you. NH, short and sweet, just like Nayland." Tyler groaned from the implied threat. He felt responsible for Tusia's parents joining the conspiracy and knew the pressure was on to ensure it went without a hitch. Tyler needed to know who the Onyelum was prior to the turnover. He still had a day before the meeting, so he hoped the marshal would come through. His drive to find the Onyelum was so strong, he threw aside caution and called the marshal directly for an update. He knew it would raise the man's suspicions, but with only a day left, he had to risk it. "Yes, sir," the marshal answered, crisp and remote. "Sorry to bother you, Marshal." Tyler tried to sound casual, "but I wanted an update on that background information I requested." Tyler waited while the marshal accessed something online. "It is not complete, but should be enough to start with. I should have the rest of it by tomorrow evening." Tyler did not like the sound in the marshal's voice. Clearly he felt left out and used, but Tyler had no choice. He could not share anything with the marshal for fear of failure. It was bad enough his in-laws found out. If his staff knew, they would have no choice but turn in their leader. No one on the planet would understand or believe the idea of an Onyelum. It would sound so foreign. It would only cast suspicion on himself. He had to continue lying and hope the marshal's loyalty outweighed his suspicions. "Thank you, Marshal. Please send me what you have, and I'll expect the rest tomorrow." "Yes, sir." His response was cold and distant. Tyler couldn't even say goodnight before the marshal disconnected. That was truly out of character, and it worried Tyler. 3:02. Admiral's ghost. Nonetheless, the information he promised began streaming into his personal system. Tyler left the office and moved into his living quarters to view the information from the comfort of a couch. He poured a tall glass of wine and settled in to read. He switched on the main viewer and downloaded the information the marshal had sent. As usual, it was neatly organized and easily queried. Tyler took a large sip of the wine as he steeled himself for the hunt. According to the categories provided, the Marshal had retrieved only the information on Admiral Thiessen, Naylan, and Regent Sneered. Apparently, the information on the Emperor was forthcoming. No matter, Tyler was more interested in these three anyway. He took another drink and opened the file on Thiessen. He read through the medical and biographical information on the Admiral and immediately discounted him. According to his records, the man had almost never been sick in his life. The only injury he had sustained was during a tweeling sport match in college. He had collided with an opposing player, and both were knocked unconscious for a brief period. Tyler noted the game was similar to lacrosse on Earth. Temporary unconsciousness would not have provided an opportunity for Onyalam possession, so that ruled him out. Adani confirmed as much as Tyler moved on to Naylan. Before he opened Naylan's file, a pop-up message informed Tyler the information was sealed by the Imperial Palace, and opening it constituted a breach of Imperial security, punishable by imprisonment or death. It was a standard Imperial seal. But what concerned Tyler was why Naylan's records were sealed by the Palace. Tyler ignored the warning and opened the file. He was already a traitor. One more charge meant nothing. By the time he finished looking over Naylan's records, he had finished his glass of wine. He quickly refilled it and dug deeper into Naylan's childhood. It appeared Naylan was a very sick child, including an incurable at the time childhood disease that affected normal muscle development. He'd been bedridden for most of his childhood and was once brought back from near death when his chest muscles failed and he stopped breathing. Tyler was astounded. Not only had he stopped breathing, but twice his heart had stopped on 2 different occasions. It was a miracle that he had survived to adulthood. According to current The Admiral's Soliloquy 303 records, a cure was found, and new treatments had all but changed Naylan into a normal, healthy adult. It was enough for suspicions, but being so long ago almost ruled out Naylan. What Onyalam would have chosen a bedridden child near death. He came from a rather obscure family of modest means. So little back then would have indicated the child would become a significant power. Current records indicated no health issues, not even a single surgery. Tyler was frustrated. Naylan could have been possessed when he was a child, but Adani agreed it was highly unlikely. Unfortunately, Tyler had to conclude it was probably not Naylan. He had hoped it would have been. It would explain so much for Naylan to be the evil spirit hell-bent on destruction. Now, however, Tyler had to believe Naylan was nothing more than bad seed seeking power and influence. Perhaps his childhood illness was reason for his adult callousness. He drank heavy from his wine and felt the numbing effects dull his anxiety. It was wonderful. Numb. That was what he needed to get through this crisis. He took another drink and opened the file on Regent Sneered. Surprisingly, his records weren't sealed. They were filled with intricate details that seemed extraordinary in official records. For instance, Tyler found references to behavioral problems when Sneered was a small child, including handwritten accounts from his mother. Apparently, Regent Sneered had been a troubled child. That fits. Tyler ran through the records, astounded at what he was seeing. Sneered was in and out of multiple institutions for troubled youth, and even a brief stint in a penal institution. He had swarms of doctors who constantly tried to determine the cause of his behavior, and his parents spent millions trying to rehabilitate him. Tyler was amazed. A man with such a checkered past had reached such powerful heights. But then, the Emperor was known to hire such thugs. Who else would do the work no Emperor would do? So much about Regent Sneered. began to make sense. He was devious and dangerous, and as far as Tyler was concerned, the #1 suspect. Who better to attract an onnulum than a person who was already destructive? The only thing missing was a near-death experience. Tyler read past his college records and into his first career. Not surprising, he was recruited by the Imperial Palace into the 304 Admiral's Ghost Intelligence Community for unspecified posts. Tyler thought he knew what that meant. Assassination. He had served in unspecified posts for over 7 years before being promoted into the Emperor's personal staff. From there, he moved rapidly up through the ranks as he befriended the Emperor and influenced the political arena. At the early age of 35, he was appointed to his current position of regent. It was the highest post within the Imperial Palace. Nice. The Emperor had an assassin as his highest advisor and chief of staff. It spoke volumes about the Emperor and his government. It was easy for Tyler to understand why traitors wanted to overthrow the Emperor and start a democratic government. Tyler couldn't understand why it hadn't happened before. However, no one on Poolto really complained about the current system. Sure, there were some who had their own agendas that differed from the palace, but Tyler assumed they were minorities that were quickly dealt with. By sneered, no doubt, most of the common people enjoyed a prosperous life and rarely complained. Why would they want their government changed? He thought he began to see a potential flaw in the conspiracy. Even the national hero might not be enough to convince the average person of Poolto that a democratic government was necessary. With democracy, the average person would have to become involved with their government in a more intimate way. They would have to pay attention to its inner workings and make sure those in power were held accountable. Tyler doubted most wanted that responsibility. He thought back to many Americans who were not involved in the government and didn't vote. It would likely be the same on Poolto. That's when you had to watch out for who was in power. Tyler thought about Nayland. He finished his second glass of wine and refocused on Sneerd's records. There had to be something to cast suspicion on him besides his obviously evil nature. However, Tyler wasn't finding anything. Sure, he had been sick and he had injuries, especially during the fighting when he was younger. Unfortunately, his records when he was unspecified were virtually non-existent. Obviously, those were sealed and inaccessible. Anything could have happened during those 7 years. It was dangerous work, and you were bound to be in the Admiral's soliloquy 305 positions where injury and death were commonplace. But Tyler found nothing. He had a new thought and switched his search tactics. Nearly everyone received physicals when appointed to euphoric state positions. If anything serious had happened to Sneerd during those 7 years, it might show up in a physical later on. He found the date when Sneerd was appointed regent and accessed the Imperial health records. There it was, a full physical examination upon acceptance of the post. Tyler scanned the document, ignoring most of the information he didn't understand. Finally, he located a complete body scan that revealed every single scar, burn, bruise, and contusion the man ever had. There were many, but nothing that would be severe enough to place him near death. Damn, this was obviously going to be harder than Tyler had first thought, even with such prolific records. He refilled his glass while pondering the problem. He scanned all current medical records for anything unusual, but nothing appeared lethal or cause for alarm. He had wanted Nayland to be the one who was possessed, but failing that, he had always assumed it would be the regent. Now, however, he didn't know what to think. Perhaps it was none of them. Maybe they were just greedy, evil men. He had scanned through the regent's mission entries and was ready to give up when something caught his eye. It was a simple file that had a special security lock on it. Although there were many of those, this one was named Trierdine. The Admiral's memories stirred from the name, and Tyler searched to find out why. There was only a small reference to the asteroid in an old battle report. According to the report, the asteroid was lost during the battle. It didn't seem to warrant special interest, but he was willing to search anything at this point. Turning on another viewer, he called up information on the asteroid named Trierdine. Unfortunately, he was not getting any hits. He changed his search parameters and tried searching for asteroids lost in the war. Finally, a single hit, but it didn't have any information. It was a simple list of asteroids lost during the first 5 years of the war. 306 Admiral's Ghost. At first, it appeared the list was simply names in 3 columns. Trierdine was near the bottom with one other to the right of it. The other name was Kagan, but Tyler assumed that was just another asteroid lost. It took a moment before he realized all the names to the right of those in the first column were Krildun names. He saw the pattern. The first column contained the names of Pool-Toe asteroids lost during the first 5 years of the war. The second column contained the new name for the asteroid after it was captured by Krildun. The third column, which Tyler noted had few names, contained the names of asteroids that were recaptured by Pool-Toe. It all made sense. The new name for Trierdine was Kagan, and was likely still a possession of Krildun. He opened another query and entered Kagan. According to the search results, Kagan was both an industrial park on Krildun and an asteroid captured during the war. He looked through the information but only found general descriptions of Kagan and its economic feasibility. Apparently, the asteroid had little in the way of resources, but did provide a tactical advantage. He was frustrated, since there was nothing to connect the Regent with this asteroid other than the locked file. He made several attempts to unlock the file himself, but nothing worked. All his military command codes failed. The wine and fruitless searches were taking their toll, and Tyler was ready to call it a night. He was about to shut down the viewers when he thought about searching the military records for Kagan. Surely if it was lost in the war, there would be some records within the military, especially if it had tactical value. He queried several databases and received only marginal hits. Finally, while searching the procurement records, he found a report labeled Battle Losses, Asteroids. The dates coincided with the first 5 years of the war. He opened it and found an entry for Trierdine. According to the records, Trierdine was a small military outpost built as a refurbishing station near the front lines. It was still under construction when Krildun attacked. Tyler scanned through various lists of equipment and ordnance that had been on the asteroid at the time of the battle. From an overall war standpoint, Trierdine was an insignificant loss other than its location. Tyler was ready to give up when he saw a personnel manifest scroll by. He stopped and moved back. The list contained names and identification numbers, no rank or military affiliations. Tyler couldn't even tell who was civilian or who was the Admiral's Soliloquy 307 military. However, he noted that near the top of the list was the name A. Sneerd. Tyler thought it couldn't be coincidence. Sneerd had been on that asteroid. In fact, he had been on the asteroid when it had been attacked and captured. If that were true, then Sneerd had been captured. Tyler easily confirmed this when he found a prisoner exchange comment. Apparently all captured personnel were eventually returned in exchange for Krildun prisoners. It was starting to make sense why this file was locked. If the public found out Regent Sneerd had been a prisoner of Krildun, then suspicion would have been cast on him and the Imperial Palace. No returned prisoners were ever fully trusted again. It was military policy to discharge all prisoners returned by the enemy. They were not treated poorly. They were simply removed from positions of authority. Many were given pensions for their honored service and put out to pasture. This is what made Sneerd's capture so problematic. He was then, and still is, the highest-ranking person on the Imperial staff. Despite his capture and 6-month detainment, the palace had kept him in his position. Why would the Emperor ignore the general policy? Did Sneerd have information on the Emperor that would persuade him to bury this? Tyler didn't think he could find out without opening the file. He wondered what Sneerd had been doing on such an insignificant asteroid to begin with, especially one so close to the front. He had to see the contents of that file, even if it didn't confirm his suspicions of Onyalum possession. He called up Officer Slyas and woke her. He hadn't realized how late it was, but then he only had a day to work this out. "Officer Slas," he began, "I have a sealed file from the Imperial Palace that I need access to. Unfortunately, the contents are delicate and cannot be seen by anyone other than myself. Is there any way to break the seal myself?" She looked tired, but was giving it thoughtful deliberation before answering. "I think there might be, sir, but I'll need to contact someone I know from the Academy." She paused and looked concerned. "Sir, should I be concerned for my career if I help you with this?" Tyler was surprised by her bluntness, but she had a right to know. It might look bad if something came of it, but for the moment, it is between you and I. On 308 Admiral's Ghost. "I understand, sir," she said calmly. "I don't think I'll need the file, but can you send me a brief description of its security seal?" Tyler agreed and forwarded the description. Officer Slyas promised him news as soon as possible. Tyler instructed her to keep all information in verbal communications to prevent any trail from being formed. She agreed and said she would call immediately when she had something. Tyler was curious. What did the file contain, and how could that information be used against Sneerd? Would it be enough to convince the Emperor to accept peace? Tyler doubted it, but was willing to use anything at that point, even if it was thin. He ran down the next day's schedule before turning into bed. If he was lucky, he could still get a few hours sleep before his first meeting. It was with Marshal Sliss, and he dreaded the possible questions he would face concerning the medical information. He needed to stall the Marshal, but was too tired to think of anything. Perhaps in the morning he would have fresh ideas. At least he'd likely be sober. The final day proceeded fast. Tyler woke early with a pounding headache from the wine, but after eating breakfast he felt significantly better by the time he met Marshal Sliss. Despite his earlier trepidation, the meeting was brief, professional, although somewhat cold. Even though Tyler had expected the Marshal to question him about the medical information, the Marshal uncharacteristically remained quiet and on task. Since Tyler felt woozy from the night before, he was happy to avoid the conversation. He even held back from asking for the missing medical information on the Emperor. As the day wore on, meeting after meeting became a blur in which Tyler barely participated. He could not take his mind off of the upcoming events. He played out the scenario over and over in his mind, but was never satisfied with how he handled it. He had to admit he was unskilled as a traitor, and everything he believed in did not necessarily match those of his co-conspirators. It made it difficult for him to support the cause with real conviction. Around lunchtime, he received a message from Officer Slas urging him to contact her. When he was released, he made his way the Admiral's Soliloquy 309 back to his office and called her back. It was brief as she wished to see him in person. When she arrived, she was all business. Despite the implied threat to her career, she had tracked down an illegal method to crack the sealed file. Tyler wanted her to simply tell him how, but she insisted doing it herself to save time. Tyler didn't ask how she found out, but let her do the work while he sat back quietly. Only once did he see a look of curiosity on her face. The look came as she noted the file name, but was quickly replaced with professional focus as she continued to break the seal. It took 10 minutes before the contents of the file scrolled across the screen. As if wanting to protect herself from further implication, Officer Slaws immediately turned away from the opened file and asked if there was anything else she could assist him with. Tyler told her no, thanked her, and released her to her duties. He spent the rest of lunch reading all the contents of the file. It was created by the intelligence branch of the Imperial Palace, and Tyler was surprised it was with the rest of Sneerd's personal files. Nonetheless, it was a summary report on the incident at Trairdine. The report had been requested personally by the Emperor. Apparently, the Emperor had originally wanted to maintain the policy of relieving the prisoner of war from his post, but a report had been requested to see if they could avoid it. According to what Tyler read, Sneerd had been on Trairdine at the request of the Emperor himself. Unfortunately, the report did not stipulate why. Tyler assumed the report was not classified at the same level as the mission Sneerd had been on. The report listed various meetings between Sneerd and a variety of people, both civilian and military. It read rather normal until the part where the attack began. At that point, Sneerd had been in a meeting at a non-military facility far from the depot. It had probably saved his life, as most of the military personnel and facilities were destroyed during the attack. When the bombardment had begun, they had immediately moved to an escape vehicle built into the facility. Although the vehicle could not adequately fit all the people, they loaded it up anyway. The overloaded ship had just been capable of launching as the Krildan destroyed their facility. As the escape vehicle made its way towards Pulto-controlled space, it was hit by a missile intended to disable the ship. 310 Admiral's Ghost. Unfortunately, the overcrowding caused the missile to create greater damage than simply disabling the ship. Instead, the ship decompressed, and by the time it was captured, nearly everyone was either unconscious or dead. Among the dead was one A. Sneerd. Remarkably, he'd been brought back from death by surgeons on the enemy ship. 7 other dead were also revived. Tyler thought the story had too many similarities to his own. At that point, he had to assume Sneerd was the most likely candidate. It was both logical and practical. Even after being a prisoner for 6 months, Sneerd was placed in isolation for nearly a year, undergoing extensive psychological evaluation. Remarkably, he had been the one who had requested the treatment and evaluation. All of it was carried out by the intelligence branch at a secret facility located somewhere within the Imperial Palace. The rest of the report listed the results of various testing they'd done, with a final page outlining the overall results of the incident, with a recommendation to reinstate Sneerd to his post as Imperial Regent. Apparently, the Emperor had been satisfied with the results, or he would have removed Sneerd from office. Tyler didn't know what type of testing Sneerd had been through, but some of the Admiral's memories suggested it was something akin to torture. Tyler had a new respect for the man's tough veneer. It was no wonder he was such a dangerous individual. Tyler knew he would have to play his cards carefully. Sneerd was not a man to trifle with. All of this left him feeling greater anxiety about the upcoming command code turnover. If Sneerd was possessed, then he might also suspect the Admiral. Tyler was no match for a man who had gone through so much, combined with intelligence experience. He felt a chill of fear as he returned to rest of the meeting. Everything was beginning to feel like a dream, and Tyler went through the afternoon schedule in a trance-like state. In his mind, various worst-case scenarios played out over and over again. Even the Admiral's most powerful tactics were unable to devise a suitable response. Tyler was alone against formidable powers. Even Adani remained unusually quiet. This feeling of loneliness continued to haunt him as he made his way back to his quarters. His agenda complete, only a night of sleep stood between him and his fate. He had no illusions about sleep. Although he needed the rest to fortify his resolve, he also knew the import of tomorrow's events would deny him that basic, the Admiral's soliloquy, 3 out of 11 necessity. Instead, he retired to the couch and opened another bottle of wine. Perhaps inebriation would bring sleep, if only a less restful one. In the morning, Tyler drifted through his normal routine. Breakfast, the latest news, daily briefings. He ignored most of it. Instead, he wrestled with fear and anxiety about the meeting to come. He was to report to the palace later that morning in a transport provided. It seemed odd they ordered transport since he could easily walk the distance. His anxiety barely in check, he dressed in formal attire, as appropriate for the palace. Before catching the transport, he briefly met with his staff. The marshal was absent, and no one could explain why. Despite that, Officer Sloss took charge and quickly ran down the list of items on the agenda. The only message Tyler had from the marshal was a private note indicating the information he requested was delayed another day. Tyler read the message with little concern. He was certain the person to fear was Regent Sneered, and he still didn't have a plan to deal with it. The staff meeting ended abruptly while he was lost in thought. He noticed puzzled looks and quickly took charge to release them. He knew they expected a response, but he delayed the questions until returning from the palace. Assuming I return. Although the Admiral had been to the palace many times, the memories of it didn't ease Tyler's anxiety. He desperately wanted a drink, but was glad he was sober for the meeting. Dutifully, he wore the small device Naylin had provided. He had almost left it behind, but remembered it at the last moment. Naylin failed to tell him what it was for, but he wore it anyway. He only hoped it passed the security screening. It and he both passed through security without a glitch. The Admiral held no memories of security checks so invasive for someone of his position. He assumed they were new precautions due to the secrecy surrounding their new offensive. Regardless, he was extremely nervous when placed in the scanner. 312 Admiral's Ghost. The scanner only detected his personal communication device and not the device Naylin provided. Chalk 1 up for Naylin. As Tyler was escorted by 3 palace guards, he noticed not much had changed in that part of the palace. It was still elegantly decorated and adorned with some of the finest art of Pulto. Tyler admired many of the pieces, especially one scenic painting that looked like the Tuland Estate winery. It made Tyler think about Tusia and settling down. If he survived, they would move to Tuland and raise a family. If I survive. Adani had remained eerily quiet up to that point. He hadn't even visited Tyler's dreams. Tyler assumed his lack of real sleep didn't provide the opportunity. Still, he had tried to engage the aliens several times, but was quickly put off. The last thing Adani had said was, "If I am needed, I will speak." Tyler wasn't certain, but he almost sensed fear. They moved out of the public areas and down several levels to more private floors. He had 2 guards leading with 1 following behind. It made Tyler feel like a condemned man on the way to the gallows. He hoped his nerves weren't as visible as they felt. Finally, they came to the end of a long corridor barren of decor. The 2 guards stopped and stood at either side of the simple door. The Admiral had no memories of this area, and it fed into his fears. One of the guards opened the door and nodded for Tyler to enter. Tyler braced himself before walking into the room. Despite the bland corridor, the room was large and grand. He noted a large dais with what could only be called a throne to his left. To his right was a series of tiered seating that looked similar to jury seats in a courtroom. Dominating the center of the back wall was a large view screen dwarfing everything else. Tyler figured it was at least 30 feet tall and just as wide. The ceiling soared 100 feet overhead, decorated in gold trim and intricately carved figures. Tyler didn't recognize the various scenes they depicted, though it made him think of the governor's office on Sirneen. However, this room was square and twice the size. He expected to see the Emperor on the throne, but it was empty. In fact, Tyler was the only person in the room. He was a little surprised, but took one of the comfortable seats facing the viewer. His anxiety churned, and being alone made it grow exponentially. The Admiral's memories of taking over the command codes did the Admiral's soliloquy 313 not match the situation he currently found himself in. Calm down. Things change over so many years. He was not reassured. He nearly jumped at the sound of a door opening to his right. Several attendants entered, followed closely by Admiral Thiessen. Tyler rose from his seat and nodded to his compatriot. He noted Thiessen looked somber, despite getting what he'd always desired. Admiral Thiessen moved to a chair near Tyler and remained standing. Tyler followed suit as the attendants placed small devices next to each chair. Tyler recognized them as the command code transfer devices. After placing a device near the empty seat across from Tyler, the attendants stood behind each chair, waiting. Finally, a new attendant entered the room to announce the Emperor. Supreme Commander of Pooltoe Forces and Admiral Oslu, please honor our beloved and great leader, Emperor Hallen Yusofol. With that, he bowed deeply as the Emperor made his way into the room. The Emperor wasted no time taking his seat across from Tyler. Tyler and Admiral Thiessen took theirs in turn, Tyler waiting last as demanded by rank. The Emperor jumped right into it. Perhaps before we get started, we should transfer the codes. He signaled the devices next to each of their seats. Tyler was confused. Before they get started? He had thought the entire reason for the meeting was the transfer. Did they expect him to report on the Commission's progress? He was not prepared to do that. The Commission hadn't even finished the report. Tyler leaned forward. "I'm sorry, sir. Did you say before we get started?" "Indeed," the Emperor replied cryptically. "Just take the device next to you and we can begin." Tyler watched Admiral Thiessen and the Emperor pick up their devices. What was he to do? He had assumed a more elaborate ceremony before handing the codes over. In the past, each member had taken pledges and verified their identity before beginning the transfer. How could they bypass that process? Tyler was confused and felt a little fear. He'd not been prepared to act so quickly. Nayland had said he would receive a signal that would indicate the peace ship's readiness. However, he hadn't said what the signal would be. 314 Admiral's ghost. He had no choice. He had to divert suspicion and follow along. At least Regent Sneerd was not present. He picked up his device and waited. "Good," the Emperor said, as he fiddled with some controls on his device. "I believe we each stick a finger into the hole on the left side of the device and then press the large button on the top. That will verify our identities so we can proceed." They each placed their fingers into the small holes and pressed the button. Tyler felt something warm against the tip of his finger, followed by a tiny prick. It was not painful, just unexpected. Instantly after the prick, Tyler felt a cooling sensation sweep over his entire finger. Suddenly, a blue light lit next to the button. It took only a few moments before each of them had blue lights displayed. Tyler was relieved to see his matched theirs. "Excellent. We are who we say we are." Now we each will be given a statement on the small viewer on the backside of the device. Please read the statements carefully before pressing the large button to confirm your acceptance. Again, Tyler followed suit, as each flipped their device over to read the display. Although the screen was small, Tyler easily read the text. The statements matched the pledges in the Admiral's memories. Apparently, the process was automated to make it more efficient. Just what Tyler didn't need: efficiency. He quickly read the statements before turning over the device and pressing the large button. Like before, the device displayed a blue light. Damn, Tyler thought. They were nearly to the transfer. There was still no signal from the peace ship. Once he turned over the codes, Thiessen would change them or use them to re-enable the fleet after they were disabled. Tyler was running out of time and didn't know how to stall. Fine. The Emperor's light glowed blue. Admiral Oslu, please enter your codes into the device using the viewer on the back side. I'll enter the Imperial transfer codes, and at that point, Admiral Thiessen will receive the command codes on his device. He will then memorize these codes before ending this part of the meeting. There it was again, a reference to there being more to the meeting than the transfer. Tyler had no choice but to comply. Nothing he could do at that point would stall the proceedings without raising suspicions. He hoped the peace ship, or Nayland, the Admiral's soliloquy 3 out of 15, was watching. Otherwise, the codes would soon be Admiral Thiessen's. Protocol dictated he had to immediately change them, although that would take time to propagate to the fleet. Tyler flipped over his device and entered the command codes. He entered them as slowly as he could, thinking something would happen to stall it at any moment. Nothing. The Emperor had already entered his own codes and sat waiting. A blue light displayed on his device. Tyler could no longer stall and completed the long sequence before flipping the device over and pressing the button. It took a moment before his device displayed a blue light. Just as quickly, a blue light lit on Admiral Thiessen's device. On that signal, Admiral Thiessen flipped his device and began memorizing the codes. If the Admiral's memory held true, Admiral Thiessen had about 3 minutes to memorize the codes before they were erased. So far, it had all followed the Admiral's memories, except in the past they had used only one device. Finally, the blue lights went out on all 3 devices as the process completed. The peace ship was too late. Tyler still held the device, fear paralyzing him. How would he proceed? The device vibrated gently in his hands as the self-destruct mechanism destroyed the circuitry inside. He placed it back on the table as despair swept through him. He'd let down his family, and now they might pay the ultimate price. How could he have known it would happen so fast? What could he have done? Surely Nayland knew what was happening. How could they blame him for the failure? Where were they? Where was the signal? Admiral Thiessen got up from his chair and moved to the console beneath the large viewer. Tyler knew Thiessen was preparing to change the codes, and there was nothing he could do about it. The Emperor, looking satisfied, put down his device and signaled to an attendant. At his signal, the attendant walked over to the door on the right and opened it. Tyler watched several people enter and take Saz in the tears. It looked like a jury returning from recess. At the same time, the main entrance opened behind Tyler, and he watched as a line of guards took up positions along the interior wall, blocking the entrance and looking menacing. Tyler was 316 Admiral's ghost, extremely nervous. This wasn't part of the ceremony. What was going on? He looked to the Emperor, who ignored him. He looked to Admiral Thiessen, but he also ignored the changes as he changed the command codes. Tyler's anxiety was rising, though he tried to appear normal. He stared at the rows of people filling the tiered seats, but didn't recognize one of them. Since none wore rank or uniforms, he assumed they were civilians or part of the Imperial staff. Was this a new part of the ceremony? He didn't think so. Admiral Thiessen finished changing the codes and returned to his seat. As if in a parade, signals to waiting people were sent through the door. Tyler watched in horror as more people entered the room and took seats behind the emperors. First in line was Regent Sneerd, who did not take a seat, but signaled to those behind him to take one. Behind the regent was Marshal Slice, followed closely by Illyria. Neither made eye contact with Tyler, and he immediately knew nothing good was about to happen. The last one to enter was none other than Nayland Hoos, looking smug and content as usual. He took his seat, and the Emperor stared coldly into Tyler's eyes. "Admiral," he began, "you are probably wondering what is going on and why I have ordered these people to appear before us." Tyler nodded. The Emperor, satisfied with the gesture, continued. "Very well, I will tell you. We have grave concerns over your behavior recently. In fact, we believe you to be involved in a vast conspiracy to overthrow this very government. In essence, to betray this planet to our enemy." Tyler was stunned. He'd never expected this, and he had no idea how to react. He remained emotionless. "I see. And what proof do you have of this charge?" "A great deal, actually. Today, we are here to understand the charges against you and to analyze the evidence before you are formally charged. The people in the stands consist of civilians randomly chosen to evaluate the evidence against you and to determine if charges are appropriate." The Emperor swept his hands toward the waiting jury. The Admiral's soliloquy. 317 Dweller followed the Emperor's hand and surveyed the jury once more. Some held looks of disbelief while others stared back menacingly. The Admiral was a national hero, and those that were shocked must have been disturbed by what they were hearing. At least his reputation would hold some sway. He tried desperately to think of what evidence they could have to charge him, but couldn't think of anything directly. Still, with Nayland there, anything was possible. Had everything fallen apart, and Nayland was betraying him to save himself? "And these people to my left?" Tyler asked, waving a hand at Nayland, the Marshal, and Illyria. The Emperor gazed at them before responding. "These are your accusers here to give evidence." Great. He could understand why Illyria was there. She obviously wanted revenge because he had rejected her. But the Marshal and Nayland was part of the conspiracy. How could he give evidence? Tyler thought about his family and Nayland's hold on them. Maybe that was it. They would be hostages to prevent Tyler from implicating Nayland. Perfect. He was all alone. He looked at the Marshal, who wouldn't meet his eyes. The Marshal knew about Nayland, so how could he sit with him now as an accuser? It didn't make sense. What evidence were they going to present? How could Tyler defend it? As if reading his mind, the Emperor spoke. "You will not be able to defend against anything you hear today. You may only listen until charges are brought against you and you have your day in court." So that was it. He was defenseless against his accusers. The Emperor signaled to an official attendant who stepped forward, standing in front of the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are here to bear witness to accusations and evidence against Admiral Oslu to determine if the heinous charges against him are warranted. I realize this may be upsetting, especially in light of his position as our hero. It is unfortunate and yet prophetic that his father betrayed our world." That stung, and Tyler began to realize how this had all been set up, perhaps long ago. He waited to hear the testimony. He was curious to see what evidence they had to determine how he was betrayed. Three-Year Admiral's ghost, Illyria, was the first to be questioned. Tyler had no idea how she could have evidence that would constitute treason. She answered basic questions about how long she had worked for Admiral Oslu and what their relationship had been. Tyler hated the looks on the faces of the jury when she revealed she'd had a romantic relationship with the Admiral for many years. So much for his moral reputation. The next question caught Tyler off guard. Perhaps he hadn't heard right. The interrogator had asked how long she'd been employed by the Imperial Intelligence Branch. Tyler couldn't believe it. She answered calmly that she'd been recruited while attending the military academy. She was a spy. The thought cut deep. Admiral Oslu had been under surveillance for most of his career. Not only that, it had been from his lover. He felt totally doomed. She recounted the accident that had placed Tyler in the coma. She also mentioned how he had significantly changed after regaining consciousness. He had spurned her advances, gone back with his wife, and regularly made religious comments. Tyler moaned as he thought about his minor indiscretions. He'd hoped it would not come back to haunt him, but now it was used to cast greater doubt and suspicion. Still, she had said nothing that constituted treason. He waited as the interrogator asked new questions. "So, Miss Snillin, what evidence do you have as proof of the Admiral's treason?" She nodded to an attendant who went to the console underneath the main viewer. The viewer came alive, and after some fiddling, a picture filled with static began to take shape. Tyler watched in horror as the viewer displayed him with the governor, the Admiral's father, and Commandant Kolg. The picture was fuzzy and inaudible, but it was easy to make out everyone in the room. Tyler noted Nayland's picture had somehow been conveniently removed from the scene. The seat where Nayland had sat was vacant. Illyria looked extremely proud of herself. This was taken on a recent mental journey to Cyrnine for meetings with field commanders. At that time, I had reasonable doubts about the mental journey, and therefore placed a device on the Admiral to collect additional intelligence. The device was cleared through the proper channels, of course. The Admiral's soliloquy, 319. Of course, Tyler thought, probably at the Emperor or Sneerd's request. The Admiral and Tyler had been so naive. How had the Admiral lasted so long? Easy. He hadn't been a threat before. Adani's impromptu comment was cold comfort. As you can see, the Admiral and Governor Nisis met with the commander of the 3rd Fleet of the Creeldon Republic Navy, Commandant Kolg. Even more shocking, the Admiral's own father, a branded traitor of Pulto, was alive and present. She cast Tyler a malevolent look as she said this. Although we were unable to capture the audio portion of this meeting, we can only assume meeting a known traitor and one of the highest-ranking military officials of our enemy was not a social visit. The jury stared at the viewer incredulous. As far as they knew, the Admiral's father was dead. The fact that he was not fed their worst fears. Some cast furtive glances at Tyler, but none looked sympathetic. He began to understand why they'd believed he would not survive the conspiracy. But what had happened to the conspiracy? Where was the peace ship? Had everything failed? Was the peace ship a ruse? Was everything designed to discredit him and brand him a traitor like the Admiral's father? Why? He had turned over the codes and relinquished command. What more could they want? Did the disgrace and fall of the national hero really serve their purposes? How would the war effort continue without a rallying figure? He could not see the pattern and sat lonely and confused. He realized no peace ship was on its way and no signal would be sent. Like Tyler, Nayland had probably betrayed them all to gain political clout. Perhaps it was one big charade designed by Nayland to promote himself and his goals. Tyler didn't know what those were, but considering evidence had been tampered with, Nayland clearly had the backing of the Emperor. Power. Was that what all this was about? Tyler thought about Tusia and her parents. Would they survive? If they did, would they survive the disgrace? It was certain Tusia's father would be removed from the council. He might also be implicated, especially if he had really trusted Naylan. Or maybe that was it. Perhaps he had brokered a deal with Naylan to protect his family when this all unraveled. Tyler no longer knew who he could trust. He even began imagining Tusia was part of the betrayal. She and the Admiral were disillusioned for so long. Maybe she had 320. Admiral's ghost fallen out of love with him during all those years. The Admiral's affair would have been enough for her to throw aside spousal loyalty. Did he really believe that making love to her twice and getting her pregnant was enough to overcome the years of abuse and humiliation she had suffered? Perhaps she too longed for this day. Revenge at last. He'd been betrayed by everyone he'd known. It was fitting. The betrayer betrayed. Tyler had known deep down that he was out of his league from the outset. Only now did he see how naive and unprepared he truly was. He didn't have the experience and inherent distrust to recognize the webs that were woven around him. His own arrogance was his downfall. He should have listened to Adani a long time ago and stopped playing with the big boys. He thought about Adani and his unusual silence. If ever he needed him, now was time. "And what would you have me say?" Adani asked coldly. "I told you this would happen." "That's it?" Tyler exclaimed, incredulous. "Just an, 'I told you so'?" "Yes," was the only reply. Adani's lack of participation made Tyler mad. His anger grew to embrace everything that had happened to him since that fateful accident in the park, so long ago and so far away. This was the fabulous life he was to experience. This was his destiny, to screw up everything and destroy all he had tried to save. He swore at Tosolan, at Adani, and the universe that had let him live. He'd been doomed from the moment he took over as the Admiral. The sound of Marshal Sliss brought Tyler back to the proceedings. The Marshal, with clear pain in his voice, recounted the strange events and behaviors since the Admiral had come out of his coma. It was plain to see the Marshal was alienated by the new Admiral and had finally taken action against him. Tyler had known the Marshal would be the hardest one to fool. Apparently, he had not. Tyler was touched by the fact that the Marshal was cushioning everything he said with an implied excuse that the Admiral's actions were a direct result of his injuries. His contention, despite the interrogator's admonishments, was that the Admiral had suffered extraordinary battle fatigue and could no longer make sound decisions. He recounted battle after battle, painting of the Admiral's soliloquy 321, sympathetic picture of a great man who had finally succumbed to his own wartime successes. Tyler watched some in the jury look sympathetic and others doubtful. Finally, the interrogator pushed to the part that was likely responsible for the Marshal's cave-in, the health record information Tyler had requested. According to the interrogator, the query for such information was intercepted immediately, and a full investigation started. Once it was traced to the Marshal, he was confronted and confessed. Tyler didn't blame the Marshal. Tyler had never confided in him and had let his suspicions run wild. It was only a matter of time, and maybe a part of the Marshal wanted to get caught. Maybe he had wanted to be confronted so that he could tell someone about his beloved Admiral who had flipped his wig. Tyler felt sorry for the Marshal. He only hoped he would be spared similar charges for his testimony. He deserved to retire with honor. When asked why the Admiral had wanted the health records, the Marshal responded with what he knew. He told the jury the Admiral had wanted to use the records against those persons, but the Marshal admitted he didn't know how. The interrogator seized on that to suggest the Admiral was looking for susceptibilities to exploit for assassinations. The Marshal was shocked by the suggestion, but Tyler noted several jury members shot questioning and unsympathetic looks his way. Considering everything they had heard, it made logical sense to jump to that conclusion. If you believed the individual was plotting to overthrow the government, then assassination was a well-known tool to reach that goal. Tyler heard another nail pounded into his coffin. The Marshal fought valiantly against the accusations, but finally conceded such a conclusion was in the realm of possibility. With that final admission, the Marshal looked beaten and old. No longer the crisp, efficient military manager, he was now a shell of a man, years beyond his former glory. The unfairness fed Tyler's anger. This man had been loyal and faithful to his planet, serving in untold campaigns alongside many great leaders other than the Admiral. He was a legend in his own right, and more decorated than most of the current active personnel. Only the Admiral held more honors. To Admiral's ghost. The Marshal deserved more than this. But Tyler had let him down. It was Tyler's fault this man was shamed and forced to betray his commander. Tyler had caused the admission to collusion in a scheme that was tantamount to treason. Tyler directed his anger inward. He had betrayed the one man who had served the Admiral faithfully. He now feared for Officer Sloss, a capable officer who might now be caught in the web of treason, another victim of Tyler's ineptitude. She would be forced to resign, or worse, charged with treason, or at least unknowingly aiding a traitor. Either way, Tyler feared she would be implicated. If they had caught the Marshal, she didn't have a chance. Each of the Admiral's staff was at risk. It didn't matter if they knew directly or not, no one would trust them again. They would be forced out or given assignments that placed them in peril. The vast sweep of the consequences boggled his mind. How had he caused so much damage in so little time? Even the Admiral's family, if they survived Naylan, were in danger of treason. It stood to reason that if Tosia's newfound marriage with her husband just happened to coincide with his betrayal, then she could be just as culpable. She'd even traveled to Cyrnine, where he'd met his co-conspirators. If she hadn't wanted revenge, she would now. What a fool I was. I even helped them trap me. Tyler watched Marshal Sliss make his way back from the stand. He was a fallen man, and didn't glance at Tyler. The man's face was an image of despair, as he was seized by guilt. "I call to question Mr. Naylan Hoos," the interrogator announced loudly. Tyler watched Naylan take the stand, but caught the Marshal sending an evil look his way. Obviously the Marshal knew Naylan was involved, but was unable to say anything. It wouldn't save Tyler, but it certainly would have brought a level of fairness to the proceedings. Tyler listened to Naylan's testimony intently. Naylan recounted his meeting with the Admiral at the Grand Anor Casino, but his version was skewed and inaccurate. According to his testimony, the Admiral had approached him to recruit him in the conspiracy. His well-known connections with the palace would have fit perfectly into the conspirators' plans. Tyler fumed as lies poured from the man's mouth. How could Tyler have thought he was anything but a double-faced backstabber? Would it have changed things? Naylan had held all the Admiral's soliloquy, 323 cards from the beginning. Shuffling, dealing, and playing a game that Tyler didn't even know. Naylan had warned Tyler at the outset that he was outgunned and would suffer. It was true. Tyler would suffer. As a concerned citizen, Naylan had naturally turned over the treacherous information to the palace and worked diligently to assist in the investigation. Tyler wanted to hit the man, beating him to a pulp. He had been set up good and hadn't seen it coming. But why? Nayland's motivations remained mysterious. Tyler listened calmly to lie after lie. Based on his testimony, he was the one who sounded like a national hero. If Tyler had any chance before, it was gone. The jury would have no choice but to rule the charges were warranted. After that, it became a public trial. Tyler didn't relish the prospects of a trial. The Admiral's reputation, gone. The lives of his family and friends, gone. Everything destroyed by his own innocence. He yearned for a drink, something to take away the pain of guilt, to submerge himself in a self-loathing numbness. That's it. The chilling realization came to him. I can end it all, take down myself, and save everyone the embarrassment of a public trial. Sure, and then they'd go after everyone else with vigor. He had no illusions this would be used for propaganda, a way to garner support for the palace's agenda, whatever that was. Tyler thought about the regent and looked at the dark man. How much of this was because of him? Was it due to an onulum that possessed him? Tyler tried to peer through his cold exterior to find the alien within. He saw nothing to indicate one existed. Nayland finished his testimony and returned to his seat, a smug smile on his face. The interrogator released the jury to deliberate their decision, a decision Tyler already knew. Guilty. The jury filed from the room as the Emperor shot Tyler a cold and penetrating stare. Even Admiral Thiessen appeared disconcerted by the accusations leveled at his former commander. Tyler remained emotionless and unmoving. At least he wouldn't give them the satisfaction of watching him cower and hide from the truth. He'd stand tall and defend the honor of the Admiral as best he could. Ha! Adani scoffed. You've done a fine job of it so far. Tyler ignored the jibe. The Emperor rose and released the Marshal and Illyria. He even signaled Thiessen out, although Thiessen appeared shocked to be excluded. Regardless, Thiessen, 324 Admiral's ghost, followed everyone else from the room. After they'd gone, the Emperor signaled his guards out. Finally, the Emperor turned to Tyler as Nayland and Regent sneered, watched with curiosity. "Well, Admiral," he said in a condescending tone, "it looks like you've put yourself in a fine position." He stole glances at Sneerd and Nayland. The infamous tactician, outmaneuvered by a civilian. He sat down, folding his hands together. He looked far too smug, an unusual show of emotion. "You are free to defend yourself now. We are not on record. What do you say, traitor?" He spat the word at Tyler. Tyler wasn't sure how to respond. He hadn't expected any of this, least of all a private conversation with the Emperor. He glanced at Sneerd and Nayland. Well, almost private. He figured they would hear the accusations, reach the inevitable decision, and place him in custody. What could he say? Not guilty. That was a joke. Clearly Nayland had the upper hand. He looked at each in turn. They stared back cold. Only Nayland had a slight smile on his face. Tyler pictured his face bloodied and disfigured, but it didn't help. What did he want to say in his defense? Accuse Nayland, plead insanity. Nothing sounded plausible, so he said the only thing that came to mind. "I believe your regent is possessed by an alien entity." Tyler regretted it the moment he said it. Both the regent and Nayland looked dumbfounded. Only the Emperor remained calm, an upraised eyebrow the only indication he'd heard Tyler. The regent, looking confused, glanced back and forth between Tyler and the Emperor, not certain how to respond or whether he should. Tyler didn't see fear on the regent's face, but there was definitely confusion. Tyler didn't know how to take that. Maybe he wasn't possessed? Then again, if the onulum was inside for years, his reactions would be well rehearsed and second nature. There was no way Tyler could tell. The Emperor, staying cool, signaled Nayland to leave. Nayland was shocked, but left as ordered. Tyler was certain he could rule out Nayland as the Unyalam, but the Regent. Tyler had played his one card, but wasn't sure how to finish the hand. How could he prove it? He couldn't. As Nayland left, the Regent moved into the seat where Thiessen had sat. His look turned cold, a blank slate upon which Tler could read nothing. He and the Emperor stole glances with each other, the Admiral's soliloquy 325, until finally the Emperor stood up and walked back to the console under the large viewer. I had my suspicions about you, Admiral, from the very first day I met with you, after your failed offensive. Tyler didn't like the way he emphasized the word failed. I sensed you had changed, perhaps for the better, but then, perhaps for the worse. The Emperor played with some of the controls while he continued. We have never been allies, you and I, but neither were we adversaries. I kept an eye on you, and you, through the Marshal, tried to keep an eye on me. Tyler wasn't certain where this was heading. It seemed an odd response to the accusation he had just leveled at the Regent. Tyler glanced at the Regent, but the man was staring at the Emperor, waiting. I never suspected this treachery, and even when it was brought to my attention, I was confused by the lack of motive. Your distrust of the palace could not have been sufficient reason to warrant treason. A decorated officer, the Supreme Commander, a man whose feats are only equaled by his integrity. Why would this man choose to abandon his ethics and his world? The large viewer sprang to life, and the Emperor grabbed a remote before returning to his seat. I knew your father wasn't really a traitor, but at the time it served my purposes. I suppose in some way you posed a threat in the beginning, so I made sure you understood no one was above my law. Tyler was amazed he was hearing these admissions from the Emperor. He had no reason to share such things. Why now? The Emperor continued reminiscing. I felt secure, and you went on to be a great leader of warriors. You served my purpose well. I did not always agree with your battle decisions, but I was bright enough to understand when your tactical prowess was greater than my own, so I let you have free rein, within reason. He paused in thought. It had always been a fine arrangement, until that last offensive. Shortly after your recovery, you seemed eager to turn against me, eager to carry out your own agenda, regardless of what the palace wanted, or what I wanted. Tyler sensed anger in the Emperor. He wondered where it was heading. Perhaps the Emperor would take down him now and bypass the lengthy trial and public incrimination. That suited Tyler fine. He, no 326. Admiral's ghost longer cared about himself. Only those who had served the Admiral. The Emperor pushed a button on the remote before tossing it to Tyler. There. This is what you were seeking. Have a look. Tyler watched as the display listed a series of files Tyler recognized as the Emperor's medical records. He wasn't sure what to do. What was the Emperor angling at? Did he understand what Tyler had wanted to know? It seemed unlikely. Then again, Tyler had nothing to lose, so he took the remote and began scanning the medical records. You see, when you requested the medical records, I was initially puzzled. Why would you want those? Surely they could not provide you with anything valuable. Oh yes, the interrogator seized on it with accusations of assassination. A cheap and paltry trick, simply designed to slander your character. We knew it was not the case. You are neither capable of nor experienced in the art of assassination. We know since we are practiced in it. Tyler assumed he was referring to the Regent when he said, we. He scanned the records looking for something during the Emperor's childhood. What if he found it? Then what? Accuse the Emperor? That didn't seem plausible. But what if he could rule him out? Maybe then he could turn the Emperor on the Regent. But he had no proof. Careful, Tyler. Something is wrong. I do not believe it is as it seems. Tyler ignored Adani's warning. Nothing mattered anymore. There, he found something. A record of a hospitalization when the Emperor was only 8. He opened the file and read through it while the Emperor talked in the background. Only then did it dawn on me that you were not as you seemed. The pieces fell into place and the pattern revealed itself. We felt almost stupid when we realized what was going on. How could we have been so blind? Tyler had it. The Emperor had been hospitalized for poison. He'd suffered an assassination attempt at the age of 8. His own sister had done it, but she'd been dealt with silently by their father, the Emperor at that time. Apparently, blood was not thick in this family. He read more details and found what he'd feared most. The Emperor had died from the poisoning, but had miraculously the Admiral's soliloquy 327 recovered, though not from any medical assistance. The poison was known to be 100% fatal. That meant, and so we came to the only logical conclusion, Admiral. You are the one possessed by an alien entity. Had Tyler heard him right? They were accusing him of possession. How? Wait a moment, it was beginning to make sense. You are both Onulum, Tyler exclaimed, certain he was right. How else could they suspect him? How else could they know why he wanted the medical records? Unless, of course, they were both possessed. The Emperor and the Regent exchanged brief smiles before staring back at Tyler. Very good, Admiral. Or should I call you by another name? The Emperor sat back in his chair, leveling an inquisitive look at Tyler. My real name is Creedon, but please continue to call me the Emperor. A malicious smile formed on his face. The Regent spoke. I am Goyar, but call me Regent Snared. I truly prefer that name. Tyler was stunned. 2 Onulum on the same planet, both in the highest-ranking positions and working together. Though Solon had told him they were isolated loners who took their own pleasures, he never realized they might work together. It is not unheard of, Adani confirmed. My name is Tyler, he said flatly. Tyler. The Emperor pondered the name. It does not sound like an Onulum name. Is it some previous being you have possessed? Tyler was cautious. He wasn't certain what they were capable of. No, it is my name. At least that was the truth. The Emperor looked as though he didn't believe him, but seemed willing to let it pass. Very well, Tyler. We will refer to you as the Admiral. The Emperor looked satisfied. What shall we 3 on Yalom do? Tyler didn't think he had any leverage, even being on Yalom, yet he was willing to try. Share the power? He suggested. The Emperor considered. I think not, Admiral. Your treason has made me far too wary. Understand, it is not anything I 328 Admiral's ghost myself would not have done. But being on Yalom, I know not to trust them. Yet you trust Goyar, Tyler accused. I mean, Regent sneered. He quickly corrected. The Emperor exchanged a smile with the Regent. Yes, we have been together for millennia, he said quietly. We are like brothers. Perfect. That was all Tyler needed. 2 Onulum that were like brothers. I don't care about myself, do as you will, but my wife and my child, please let them live. Tyler pleaded, hoping he could at least save them. Your wife and child? The Emperor sounded amazed. They are of no concern to me. Naylan, however. Naylan was dangerous, and the Emperor obviously had his own doubts about the man. I suppose Naylan does not know your true identities, Tyler pressed. Of course not, the Emperor conceded. Surely you are able to control him. Tyler tried to help his family. Well, the Emperor began, we can control him a little. He is very powerful and has more resources at his command than even we do. The admission confirmed what Tyler had seen Naylan demonstrate. He thought back to that early meeting with Naylan and wondered how much power he really held. What was his game? Tyler still couldn't see it. He had power and control over much of the current government. He profited handsomely from the war, so what was missing that he needed to possess? Then, you must know his complicity in the conspiracy with my father. Tyler put it out there with nothing left to lose. He noticed both of them showed a look of surprise. The Emperor immediately responded, "Nayland Hoos has been involved in this conspiracy." "Yes," Tyler confirmed. "He was the one who recruited me, despite the testimony he gave today." The Emperor absorbed his words and glanced questioningly at the Regent. Tyler couldn't believe it. They, too, had been victims of Nayland. Then, what was real? What game were they all unknowingly players in the Admiral's soliloquy? 29. As if in answer to that question, alarms rang throughout the room. Tyler watched the viewer as it changed from the Emperor's health records to a series of defense system screens. Using the Admiral's memories of the systems, Tyler saw they had detected an enemy intrusion in Pulto-controlled space. The display showed 25 Kryldan ships, shown in red, traveling in battle formation. Was this the peace ship? It looked more like an invasion. "What treachery is this?" the Emperor exclaimed as he leveled an accusatory look at Tyler. "I don't know," Tyler lied, but then he wasn't sure he was lying. This had not been part of the plan. "Regent," the Emperor commanded, "get Thiessen on the phone and mobilize our fleet." Tyler noted a real sound of concern in the Emperor's voice. Over the concern, a layer of anger rose to the surface. The Regent moved to the console, but stopped short as the viewer changed in response to the grim reality of the situation. All of the green ships, the Pulto fleet, turned yellow. It was a clear sign they were being systematically disabled. Somehow, the command codes Tyler had given Kulg worked. The invasion fleet was disabling the Pulto fleet. Hadn't Thiessen changed the codes? How did they still work? The Emperor was howling. "How can this be? What has Thiessen done?" "Perhaps you should ask Nayland," Tyler suggested calmly. The Emperor glared at him, then signaled to the Regent. The Regent quickly pushed buttons, and a part of the viewer changed to Nayland's face. From the scene behind him, Tyler thought he appeared to be in space. "Yes, Emperor," Nayland asked casually. "What may I help you with?" "Is this your doing, Nayland? Have you been plotting with Kryldan to overthrow me?" The Emperor's voice was controlled but simmering. "Whatever do you mean, Emperor? You know I am loyal to you and you alone. Is this some feeble attempt by the Admiral to clear his name? What has brought this on?" He sounded genuinely surprised, but Tyler knew it was a lie. Tyler hated to admit it, but he was good. He sounded very convincing, and even the Emperor had his doubts. The 30 Admiral's ghost. "Well, Admiral," he said between gritted teeth, "tell him what has happened." "Yes, Admiral, do tell." Nayland agreed. Tyler looked at both of them, but didn't know how to respond. What was Nayland playing at? Where did his loyalties really lie? "We are under attack, Nayland, and the Pulto fleet has been disabled using the command codes I gave you and my father." Tyler said it with little emotion. It would be easy for Nayland to simply dismiss the charge out of hand. "I see," Nayland said softly. "And I suppose you believe this trash." He looked at the Emperor from the viewer. The Emperor looked from Nayland to Tyler, not knowing who to believe. "I believe none of it," the Emperor said coldly. "And I no longer believe you, Nayland." Nayland gave an exemplary look of surprise to this revelation, but he quickly recovered and simply stated, "Suit yourself, Emperor. You're in charge." With that, he disconnected the transmission. The viewer returned to its previous display. "Why was he off-world?" the Regent asked, confused by the exchange. Where would he be going? Why now? Is it a coincidence? Good question, Regent. And I don't like the possible answers. Tyler could see neither of them trusted Nayland anymore. Tyler knew their suspicions were well-founded and was happy to have one small victory over Nayland. Unfortunately, the enemy fleet moved closer. By now, all the green lights on the viewer had turned yellow. The Pulto fleet was completely helpless. Regent, the Emperor returned to their immediate problem. "Bring up our planetary defense network. I want to see if it has been tampered with or disabled." The Regent complied, and the viewer changed to the defense grid surrounding the planet. As far as Tyler could see, the defense grid was intact and operational. The Emperor signaled to the Regent, "Good. Back to the fleet display and get Thiessen in here." The Regent switched the viewer back before making a quick call to track down Thiessen. Luckily, the Admiral had still been in the palace and came through the door within minutes of the call. "What is going on?" he demanded as he walked into the room, surveying the viewer, the Admiral's soliloquy 331. "We are under attack, Admiral," the Emperor replied with little emotion. The Admiral looked confused, but tried to take charge of the situation. "Well, let's deploy our fleet and counterattack." Tyler recognized the man realized his own mistake before he'd finished. The yellow lights throughout the display clearly indicated they were sitting ducks. "Nice, Admiral," the Emperor chided. "Why didn't we think of that?" The Emperor's tone was mocking and condescending. "Try your command codes. See if you can re-enable our fleet." Thiessen hesitated and then moved to the console. Tyler watched as he desperately entered his command codes. Tyler hoped they would work. The thought of an invasion chilled him. Thiessen looked confused and tried again. Nothing. "Sir." Thiessen turned to the Emperor, a look of concern and dread on his face. "The codes I have do not match the codes of the fleet. I don't understand." "I changed them immediately." He gave Tyler an accusatory stare. "Fool," the Emperor admonished him. "The update to the fleet never occurred. Now, of course, you cannot use the old codes, since the systems in the palace do not match those of the fleet. We have been outsmarted by our own security." Tyler thought about the device Nayland had him bring to the meeting. Was that what caused the external update to fail? Clever. Thiessen shut up, looking rejected and confused. The Emperor ignored him and turned to Tyler. "Well, Admiral Oslu, our national hero, what do we do now?" Tyler thought about it. There really was no choice. "Surrender, Emperor." The Emperor stared blankly while Admiral Thiessen looked, like he was going to keel over from shock. "To whom I wonder," the Emperor replied coldly, the large viewer suddenly filled with an immense picture of Natur Oslu, the Admiral's father. "Ah, Hallen," Natur smiled broadly. "And I see you have your new Admiral with you." The Emperor frowned before casting a dangerous glance at Tyler. "So, Natur, I see that branding you a traitor so long ago was well-founded. The prodigal son returns to decimate his home, 332 Admiral's Ghost World, is that it?" The Emperor was mocking, yet Tyler heard fear. Or was it frustration? "Yes, that about sums it up, Hallen." Natur was neither smug nor mocking, his tone professional. "I will, of course, ask you to surrender first, but then I know you won't, so we will have to demonstrate our resolve and lose innocent lives." The Emperor regained his calm, apparently analyzing the situation from every angle. Tyler knew he was hoping to find some way he would survive the crisis. Tyler knew Creedon would be desperate to retain his power. He began to see why the conflict started and spread. The Onulum had wanted war and chaos. Perhaps to Onulum war was one big chess match. Either way, they wouldn't lose. Only the people of Pulto. The Emperor sat down and casually looked at Natur. These innocent lives you speak of, are they military or civilian? After all, I have a right to know whose lives I will be spending, or rather, whose lives you will be murdering. The Admiral's father accepted the comment without emotion. Tyler wondered if the man had changed after so many years captive. To all appearances, the Creedon were vicious, barbaric creatures, but based on their culture and government, they actually seemed more passive of the two species. Tyler wanted to believe they were going to do the right thing, that they truly wanted peace, but seeing the Admiral's father so coldly talk about spending innocent lives, he had his doubts. Maybe the Creedon were cold-blooded killers, out for revenge, out to dominate the solar system. Tyler couldn't tell. I see that once again, Hallen. You play at the game as though you have nothing to lose. I assure you, you have everything to lose. The Emperor pondered his statement. Only he, the Regent, and Tyler knew he didn't have anything to lose. Tyler was afraid the Emperor would call his bluff, make him take down and destroy for the one last pleasure before being defeated. Tyler didn't want that to happen. Too many lives were in the balance, and Tyler had to act. "It is over, Emperor," he said quickly, trying to diffuse the tension that was growing. Why waste so many for no reason? Tyler was desperate. To make the Onulum inside either expose itself, in which case he might have a chance at taking over, or at least convince it there were other worlds besides this one. Maybe the Admiral's soliloquy 333 would decide to leave peacefully, go find somewhere else to play its dangerous chess match. Why indeed, the Emperor said casually. Perhaps a question we should be asking your father. He stood up and glanced quickly at the Regent and Admiral Thiessen. Thiessen was shocked enough to stay out of the conversation. "Tell us, Natur," he asked quietly. "How many patriots must die to try and save your world?" Tyler didn't like the direction it was heading. The Emperor was calling Natur's bluff, forcing him to demonstrate resolve. People were going to die, and Tyler didn't have any way to stop it. Tyler's mind raced and drew blanks. The Emperor continued. 1 million, 2 million, 1 billion. Please, Natur, how many will you spend to displace me as Emperor? That is the ultimate goal, isn't it? To replace Pulto's rightful ruler with someone else? Someone like you, perhaps? Tyler saw anger and frustration forming on Natur's face. Tyler knew he would have to react, show his resolve. Before discovering the Emperor was on Yalom, the peace mission seemed plausible. It had seemed capable of forcing the Emperor into peace, but now, only destruction seemed likely. Tyler glanced at Thiessen, who stared between Natur and the Emperor, trying to decide where the crisis was going and how it might end. "Admiral Thiessen," Tyler tried to engage him. "Doesn't peace sound better than destruction? You have pledged your life to protect Pulto. What is the right move to make here? What is the right tactical move?" Tyler was pleading with him to take a stand, but he only looked at the Emperor confused. "Please, Admiral Oslu," the Emperor scolded. "Unlike you, Thiessen is loyal to the rightful ruler of Pulto. Unlike you, he knows that surrendering would be worse than death." The Emperor spat on the ground. "You come for peace, Natur, is that it? And I suppose Creedon also yearns for peace instead of revenge and domination. Who better to trust than Creedon?" Natur was unmoved by the Emperor's theatrics. "That's right, Hallen. They want peace, not domination. I have the elected president of Krildon here to negotiate a peace deal to end the war and maintain the current government on Pulto. You could remain emperor, but you would have to live with peace." The emperor practically laughed. "Oh yes, I am sure they want me in power when this is resolved. I will be best of 334 Admiral's ghost buddies in no time." He turned to Admiral Thiessen. "Is that what you believe, Admiral? That your enemy has disabled your fleet, come with a fleet of its own, and with newer and more powerful weapons, just to ask for peace?" Admiral Thiessen didn't know how to respond and stared at Natur. Finally, he spoke. "Why did you bring so much force if all you want is peace?" he asked boldly, resolve coming over his face. Tyler groaned. He had lost the Admiral as an ally. Natur responded quickly. "Would your Emperor have just welcomed a single peace ship with open arms? Would anything but a show of force persuade your Emperor to abandon the war effort?" Tyler thought Natur looked desperate to stall the show down, but the Admiral showed no signs of backing down. "I see," the Admiral said calmly. "Then, the way to peace is through a show of force. Is that it?" The Emperor looked pleased by Thiessen as an evil smile filled his face. Natur looked resigned to the course he had to take. "As I said before, your Emperor will refuse, and then we will show our resolve. Innocent lives will be lost, Admiral, both military and civilian. Is that what you want when you have an opportunity to end it all here, without bloodshed?" Thiessen pumped himself up, turning towards the Emperor. "The Pulto military is not afraid to die defending the freedom of its homeland. We are at war, and during war, sacrifices must be made." The Emperor jumped in, looking smug. "Well, Natur, I guess we have spoken. Please enjoy the blood that will stain your hands for eternity. This planet and its people will never surrender to the enemy your traitorous soul has aligned with." He signaled to the regent, who cut the power to the large viewer, and Natur's face, looking sad, faded from the screen. The Emperor turned to Tyler. "Well, Admiral Oslu, I guess the end of Pulto may be near. Anything you wish to do to help save it, considering your treachery is to blame?" Tyler didn't know how to respond. It was clear that the Onulum was bent on fighting to the end. Tyler could only imagine the number of lives that would be lost. The Admiral's soliloquy. Tyler made one final gamble. "Is there nothing that would convince you and the Admiral that they really want peace? A gesture, an act, anything?" The Emperor laughed, but the Admiral looked deep in thought. When the Emperor noticed Thiessen's hesitation, he quickly spoke to defend his position. "Please, Admiral, don't listen to this traitor. He is just like his father." "Am I, Admiral?" Tyler asked quietly. "I know we have not always seen eye to eye, but have I ever done anything that wasn't for the good of the war effort? Anything that wasn't good for Pulto? I am and always will be a defender of my planet. I am asking, no pleading with you. Please listen to me." The Admiral remained deep in thought, staring at Tyler as though trying to read his mind. "Emperor, perhaps we should at least hear him out. Maybe they really do want peace. What can it hurt to delay them while we prepare a defense strategy? We can lead them on as though we are interested. What would it hurt?" Tyler felt a rush of hope. Perhaps they could avert this disaster. He looked at the Emperor, who remained as cold and remote as ever. "Admiral Thiessen, you are the most mindless moron I have ever met in the military." He walked up to the console and turned back to face them all. "True, it was one of the reasons why I selected you, but now that decision appears to be a liability." He touched the console, and the planetary defense grid displayed. "You would listen to this liar, a known traitor? Do you really believe they are here for peace?" He signaled to the regent, who smiled and brought up a tiny screen. Natur's face came into focus. "Natur," the Emperor said peremptorily. "My fine set of advisors think I should test you and see if peace is all you really want. Apparently in desperate times, loyalty to their Emperor is not required." Tyler didn't like the sound in his voice. It sounded calculating. Natur appeared uncertain how to respond. The Emperor continued, "I suppose I will have to appease them, show them the hard truth about Krillden and traitors." He touched several switches on the console, and another portion of the viewer changed to a code entry prompt. The Admiral's memories recognized it. It was the 336, Admiral's Ghost Defense Grid shutdown command. Only the Imperial Palace had the capacity to turn off the grid. "You see," the Emperor explained as though to children, "if I shut down the defense grid, we would be entirely defenseless. If you were only interested in peace, then you would do nothing to take advantage of that situation." He entered the codes into the prompt and engaged the shutdown. Immediately, the grid lights on the viewer began changing as each individual satellite began its shutdown sequence. "Of course," he continued, "if you wanted to conquer us, then you would take advantage of this rare opportunity to strike at the heart of our planet." Tyler knew the defense grid could be restarted, but the entire sequence took at least an hour from start to finish. Unfortunately, only the Imperial Palace could restart it, and he had no illusions that anyone within the palace would go against the Emperor. They were utterly defenseless. Tyler watched Natur as someone from behind him confirmed the defense grid was shutting down. "Fine, Halin," Natur spoke quickly. "We'll meet your challenge." The Emperor touched more controls on the console, and the fleet operations screen filled most of the viewer. Tyler watched the red lights of the Krillden fleet suddenly moving at a rapid pace towards Pulto. As if Natur noticed the same thing, he turned from the viewer and yelled out to those on the Krildon ship. What are you doing?" he demanded. Tyler watched as Commandant Kolg stepped into view and pushed the Admiral's father aside. Before switching off the viewer, Commandant Kolg said only one thing: "Goodbye, Emperor." The screen went blank as red lights on the larger part of the viewer spread out, some heading towards the yellow lights of the disabled fleet, most heading towards Pulto. The Emperor was laughing an empty, dark laugh. "You see, Admirals, you can never trust an enemy or a traitor." Tyler looked at Thiessen, who stared in shock as Krillden ships bared down on the planet. He turned towards Tyler, fear gripping his face. "I thought you said they wanted peace." Tyler had thought so too, but apparently, like Nayland, the Krillden had their own plans. He knew when he met Commandant Kolg that he was not a man who would simply follow someone the Admiral's soliloquy 337 like Natur, or Nayland for that matter. He had his own agenda, and Tyler knew that meant nothing less than complete victory. When all was said and done, he was a military commander and would not pass up an opportunity to defeat his enemy. Assuming they wanted peace, they could now achieve it without loss of Krillden lives. Only Pulto would suffer. Tyler stared back at Admiral Thiessen blankly. "I thought they did too." They all fell silent as Krillden ships took up positions around their planet. Already, a display showed they were systematically taking out all the defense grid satellites, just in case the Emperor changed his mind. Tyler didn't think he would. He had a look of disgust on his face, but was obviously resigned to his fate. Alarms sounded throughout the room as red doses streaked from the Krillden ships. The doses descended to the planet below. Tyler knew what they were. They were particle weapons or missile signatures. The Krillden ships were firing on Pulto. Nothing could stop them now. Millions, maybe billions, would die. The Emperor watched gleeful as he changed the viewer to an aerial view of the capital city. Apparently, a satellite was still operational above the city. He fiddled with the controls, and the viewer switched to a higher vantage. They watched in horror as the powerful blast headed their way. The bright light descended towards the city. "You see, my friends," the Emperor spoke final words. "Trust no one." Tyler felt nothing as a bright flash of light turned everything white for a long time. He heard nothing, only the silent white light. After what seemed an eternity, the bright light disappeared, and Tyler found himself floating above what was left of Yuso. The destruction was total. Nothing remained of the city except large craters and burning piles of debris. Tyler's mind reeled with the revelation. The city had been home to over 20 million people, all gone in an instant. He thought back to the final moments and remembered seeing multiple doses descending from the multiple ships. How many cities were lost? How many lives? The number boggled his mind. Smoke and flame simply rose from the ground beneath him, but it didn't obscure the devastation. The Emperor, the military, and the Council were all gone. 338 admirals ghost. Tyler could imagine the Pooltoe fleet, disabled and helpless in space. Krildan ships would have shot them like fish in a barrel. How many more lives lost? Whatever remained of Pooltoe would be forced to surrender. It felt strange to be back in his ethereal form. He had been the admiral for so long, he had grown accustomed to feeling and hearing. Now, only silence filled his mind. Once again, he was alone in the universe. He could sense the millions of pieces that were his essence drifting apart, as though ready to leave the destruction below him. He pulled them together and surveyed the horizon. Nearby, he saw what looked like smoke forming a dark cloud. It took a minute, but he recognized it was another Onulum coalescing. He quickly queried Adani. "Can Onulum speak with one another in this form?" Adani sounded bitter when he answered, "Yes." Tyler watched another cloud forming next to the first one. Both hovered darkly above the charred chaos. In response to his question, another voice spoke through the silence. "So you are not an Onulum, although one lives inside you. What are you then, Tyler?" Tyler couldn't tell which had spoken. The voice didn't sound like either the Emperor's or the Regent's. He guessed they wouldn't once the bodies were destroyed. "And which Onulum do I have the privilege of talking with?" Tyler asked, desperate for a reference. In response, the dark cloud to the left swirled slightly as the voice replied, "You are speaking with Krildan." Tyler had figured as much. He seemed to be the one in charge of the two. "I am from a planet called Earth, far from here. I know not where." He didn't think there was any harm in telling the truth. The dark cloud swirled in response. "Then, you were a being of matter." "Yes," Tyler conceded. The cloud stopped swirling as Tyler imagined it thought about his comments. "Then, how is it you have an Onulum inside you? Is not your form that of an Onulum?" Tyler didn't want to relive the specifics of the accident that brought him here. He was still unsure how it had happened. "Yes, the Admiral's soliloquy 339 AM, now in the form of an Onulum. And yes, an Onulum lives within me." Tyler's patience was wearing thin as the devastation and loss Pooltoe had suffered sank in. He thought about Tuzia and her family, wondering if they had survived. Would Nayland survive? Probably. He was a person who was always needed, even if it was by the enemy. They may never trust him, but they would certainly use him. Perhaps he was even on one of their ships during the attack. "What is the name of the Onulum inside you?" Krildan asked. Adani answered before Tyler could. "I am called Adani, and I do not wish to associate with you or your brother." Tyler was surprised by Adani's reaction. Surely he would feel more comfortable with his own kind than with Tyler. The two clouds swirled slightly, and a sound that may have been laughter rang inside Tyler's consciousness. "Very well. Adani and Tyler, thank you for your assistance. This world had become boring anyway. Time to find another one to rule." Tyler thought it was Creedon who had said it, but wasn't sure. He wanted to respond, but both dark clouds blinked out of existence, leaving Tyler and Adani alone, hovering above the burning embers of a shattered world. Purgatory after the destruction of Yuso. Tyler had no idea what to do. He fell into despair, haunted by the bitter loss of a chance at a normal life. He had missed the opportunity with Linda, and now he had lost it with Tusia and their child. He'd found the universe to be cruel and unfair, and he hated them for the retribution they'd bestowed upon him. Anger and anguish fueled his hatred towards everyone and everything. He wanted to destroy the Onyulum that had helped bring on the devastation, but they were gone, lost in the universe forever. He vowed if he ever ran into them again, he would have his revenge for the pain and suffering they had caused. He thought about Naylan and the Admiral's father, as culpable as the Onyulum. All had been pawns of the other, but neither had suffered. Tyler was certain Naylan felt no remorse for the way things turned out. He stood to gain power and prestige in the wake of the destruction. Tyler could only guess at Natur. Like Tyler, he'd been used by his allies to achieve what they had longed for, peace, but under their conditions. Perhaps he was as innocent as Tyler, or perhaps he was like Naylan, and also wanted to achieve his goals no matter the cost. Either way, both reaped the rewards of their treachery. With no one left in the Imperial Palace, there was no one to uncover the conspiracy. In fact, no one person on Pulto even knew what had happened, except Naylan and Natur. Sure, the military was disabled by the command codes, but no one knew how. It was inconceivable to think the Admiral, their national hero, had anything to do with it. 340 Pais. Purgatory, 341, everything had worked perfectly for the conspirators. Naylan and the Admiral's father were able to spin their own propaganda, and they started by laying the blame on the Emperor and the Imperial Palace. Tyler uncovered this as he lingered around the remnants of Pulto. He observed and watched various viewers as they spun the details of the awful tragedy. Like some bitter ghost refusing to let go, Tyler floated in silence, searching for answers and searching for Tusia. He was often tempted to take another body, to become a member of their world once more, but every time he thought about it, he realized he would never be able to see his child or be a part of its life. The pain fed his anger, so he watched their world pass by, detached and silent. From his travels around Pulto, he caught many broadcasts that spun the lies Naylan and Creedon had constructed. Evidence was fabricated, and Tyler knew who'd done the fabrication, Naylan. All of it painted a picture of an insane emperor out of control. According to the propaganda, Creedon had been on a real peace mission when the emperor had gone mad. His ravings and irrational behavior could not be stopped. Somehow he had decrypted the command codes and disabled the fleet. Creedon, on a peace mission, had stood on the sidelines in horror as the Emperor wrought destruction on his own world. Even valiant efforts by top aides and staff could not prevent the horrible destruction that rained down on Pulto. The Emperor had used the Imperial codes to turn the defense grid on his own world. The blasts rained down on an unsuspecting populace. Creedon had watched in horror as the Emperor destroyed his own planet, rather than discuss peace. It was a horrific lie, But no one remained to counter it. Naelin's knowledge and control of the military and government ensured no one would find a shred of evidence, other than the evidence he wanted them to find. Tyler had to admit, the plan was brilliant and had worked perfectly. This only increased the rage that grew within him. Krilden, the true murderers, were now portrayed as the kindly and helpful neighbors who wanted nothing more than to assist Pulto in rebuilding their tattered world. It made Tyler sick to see the lies they spread, blindfolding the public to the truth. Everything they had wanted came to pass. There was peace between the worlds, and the way they had achieved it ensured no 342 Admiral's ghost animosity between the two species. Instead, a new distrust for anything royal or imperial spread through the populace. They were ready to embrace democracy. Unfortunately, Tyler had been a part of that lie. In fact, this lie was no different than the one they had fabricated after the Admiral's failed offensive. Tyler had been a willing participant in all of it, and he realized he was as much to blame as anyone. It didn't matter he'd been used by the others in the conspiracy. He'd put his own selfish needs above those of the planet, and now millions had paid the price. As he watched the broadcasts, he saw the Admiral's father return to his shattered world, the father of their hero, now their savior. He promised to rebuild the broken pieces, bringing Pulto into a new age of peace and prosperity. He was named interim president, with promises to hold free elections after rebuilding the cities and the economy. He promised a free Pulto, one without a dictator that fed his own greed. Remnants of the royal family and the ruling governors were put on notice their days were numbered. Through crafty negotiations, each agreed to uphold their offices throughout the rebuilding until free elections put new governors in their place. It was all done perfectly. Everyone bought the ruse that offered neat and clean excuses. It promised a brighter future and created the perfect villain. Unfortunately, now the real villains were in charge. Tyler understood the new government would be a puppet of Krilden for a long time. With Krilden's good graces and infinite assistance, they had ensured a place at the table of Pulto's future decisions. Everyone was happy, except those who had lost so much. The numbers kept coming in, month after month, year after year. The final tally, assuming such a thing could be found, was 739 million takedown in the Emperor's mad attack. It was staggering, and everyone agreed to dismantle the military and the defense grid that had caused the tragedy. With Krilden as your helpful neighbor, why would you need a military? Not surprisingly, Krilden decided not to abandon their fleet. At least not yet. In fact, reports indicated Krilden was maintaining a peacekeeping fleet above Pulto to protect from renegade Imperial members bent on regaining the power they'd lost. Tyler knew it was a farce. Krilden had succeeded in conquering their enemy, and the irony was, they had used Pulto's Purgatory 343 own hero to do it. It was more than Tyler could bear. He was responsible for the millions takedown. Whole families were lost with the destruction of so many major cities. Tyler was certain Tusia and their child was gone. He had no idea where she and her family were hiding. Even if he knew, he had no idea of how to find it. Pulto was a large planet, and even an Onulum had difficulty tracking down a few individuals across an entire world. He was ready to give up when he'd caught a broadcast about the Admiral's father. President Natur Oslu had finally been reunited with his grandson, Naelin Oslu II. Tyler could not believe it. His son was alive. He watched as Tusia and little Naelin were paraded on stage with the Admiral's father. The son of the national hero would now become a hero himself. They would use him as a tool for Pulto to rally behind, to support the new movement, and embrace the free government. A sea of emotions ran through Tyler. He was happy, angry, and sad at the news his son was alive. It may have been the Admiral's body, but Tyler thought of the child as his and his alone. In the silence he now lived in, he screamed in anguish at the unfairness that held him back from the joy he'd wanted. The outburst had even scared Adani, who had taken a willing back seat to Tyler's ravings. Even though it had been years since the devastation, the rebuilding moved quickly. Tyler watched his son, now a small child, play a prominent role in the rebuilding of the world his father helped destroy. Tyler took some comfort in the fact the Admiral remained a hero. He knew Tusia and her family knew the truth, but she would never reveal it for fear of her only child, the only thing left from her marriage. It had taken time for Tyler to track down Tusia's location, but once he had, he never left their side. Like a guardian angel, he watched their lives as they picked up the pieces and rebuilt Pulto. Tyler cried as he saw the pain and the joy on Tusia's face as she nurtured and raised their son. Tyler was happy she never remarried, despite her parents' attempts. She was happy with young Naylan, and it was enough to fulfill her life and bring closure to the previous life she was glad to leave behind. Her father, now sitting on the President's Council for rebuilding Pulto, was more prominent than before. He and a handful of other counselors had escaped the bombardment. The 344 Admiral's Ghost Rest perished with Yuso. Yuso was being rebuilt and renamed Oslo City in honor of their beloved Admiral. As the years passed, the pain, guilt, and anger ate at Tyler, twisting him inside, turning him feral with ravings. The few times Adani had tried to reason with him, Tyler had lashed out with all the control he possessed. Before he realized it, Tyler had forced Adani into an exile, back in the furthest part of his subconscious. Like a distant memory, Adani existed far from the universe he had once been an integral part of. Tyler didn't care. He blamed Adani for all the sins of the Onyalam, for making Tyler what he was, and for making him feel the pain and loneliness of his stark existence. He gladly exiled Adani, even felt a thrill of excitement at the sheer force of his new and cruel will. He vowed to make the universe pay for his pain. He would make everyone pay for it. Naylan Osluth Kuo was a young man, and as always, Tyler remained by his side. Tyler's mind was twisted, and his anger continually fed his demented spirit. He took little joy in watching his son's life, but was unable to tear himself away and return to wandering the universe. He barely paid attention as Naylan readied for school. Naylan had become the top of his class and was said to be following in the footsteps of his father. Tyler took no pleasure from his son's accomplishments. He selfishly stayed, watching his son, living vicariously through him. Tyler was bitter, and the anger that consumed him prevented him from finding solace. He watched morosely as Naylan kissed his mother and left for the university. Tyler followed as usual. Naylan insisted on driving himself to school, and Tyler hovered inside the vehicle, absently making the appropriate transitions to keep up. It all became second nature, and Tyler did it without thought. With Adani in exile, Tyler was truly alone, watching his son like a never-ending movie filled with pain. As the vehicle made a right turn, Tyler made the appropriate transition, but suddenly felt a pulling sensation. It felt like something he distantly remembered. His anger obscured those memories, but the power of an Onyalam broke through his haze purgatory 345 and demanded his attention. He realized the feeling was that of being pulled inside another body. Tyler was certain nothing was near him when he had made the last transition. So what was happening? Had he accidentally made a wrong transition? He wasn't sure if that was possible. All the thoughts ran through him in an instant before he felt a world and a body around him. Slowly, a light steadily increased until Tyler found himself inside a booth at Dale's Diner in Los Angeles. Sitting across from him was Uncle Sal, a big smile on his face. It took Tyler a moment to realize what was happening. He didn't want this. He didn't want to leave his son, but try as he might, he was trapped inside the body, unable to transition back to Pulto. He looked at the body and was repulsed by his human form. After being on Pulto for so long, he felt more like the Admiral than the cheap substances dealer he'd been on Earth. Being with Uncle Sal brought back painful memories of the world he'd lost and the life he'd never have. Anger threatened to consume him. "Let me go," he screamed at Uncle Sal. "I do not want this world, and I do not want your help." As if he had not heard Tyler, Uncle Sal smiled at him as the waitress brought over 2 blue plate burger specials. "Here you go, honey," she said playfully. 2 blue plate burgers and beers. Tyler glared at Uncle Sal as he thanked the waitress and began preparing his burger. "Are you deaf?" Tyler demanded. "I told you I don't want to be here." "But the food is so good," Uncle Sal said gently. "At least stay for lunch." Tyler wanted to hit him, even if it was Uncle Sal. He was ready to strike when he remembered who Uncle Sal really was, Thosolan. What would a god do if Tyler struck him? The thought suddenly scared Tyler, so he stewed in silence. Uncle Sal dug into his burger, enjoying it way too much. Ketchup and mustard ran down his chin, and he wiped at it lightly, thoroughly engrossed in the experience. Tyler looked down at his own plate, but felt sick with the thought of food. He looked at the cold beer and decided that was acceptable. He drank it in one gulp, the fresh, crisp taste like music to Tyler's mouth. He called for 2 more and promptly drank Thosolan's 346 Admiral's Ghost. Thosolan didn't seem to care and nodded approval to the waitress who looked concerned with Tyler's display. "Well, good," Uncle Sal said quietly. "You're thirsty. At least I won't be eating alone." He took another bite of his burger and smiled at Tyler, who stared blankly. Apparently his new body wasn't used to the effects of alcohol, and he quickly felt the numbing he desired. The waitress brought 2 more, and Tyler drank both without a care. The waitress stared in disbelief until Uncle Sal interjected. "He has just lost a loved one. It's okay." Her shock was replaced with a look of pity, and she whispered quietly that she would bring a couple more. Tyler watched Uncle Sal through the haze of alcohol and laughed hysterically at the caricature of the man he'd once watched as a child. His anger was replaced with a feeling of reckless abandon. He relished the feeling and went on the offensive. "Nice place you got here, Uncle Sal." He filled the name with sarcasm and disgust. "Thank you, but I can't take the credit," Uncle Sal confided. "Your memories are so rich with the details of your old world, I was able to create this quite easily." Tyler snorted. "My old world?" he mocked, gesturing grandly. "Pulto is my old world, the world that I destroyed." Uncle Sal stopped eating and leveled Tyler a sad look. "I think you had help destroying that world." "Yeah, but I was the one who betrayed it. I was the one who let it fall into the hands of those treacherous backstabbers." His anger rose to the surface, and he noted several people, including a policeman, turn towards his outburst. He didn't care. Let them stare. They weren't real anyway, just shams constructed by Uncle Sal for his own enjoyment. Uncle Sal stared calmly, ignoring the people around them. Remember, Tyler, it was I who created Poulto. It is my world, not yours. This caused Tyler to pause, but only for a moment. Damn this god, if he wasn't going to let him grieve in guilt. I don't care. It was my world. He sounded petulant as the alcohol brought out the worst. He wanted to lash out at everything, to cause the same pain he felt. He wanted to reach out and smash the faces of those smug Purgatory 347 people who stared at him from around the diner. Damn them and damn Thosolan. Uncle Sal took it calmly, a serious expression replacing the smile he had before. He wiped his mouth before pushing his blue plate burger aside. Tyler sat back, challenging him with his stare. Uncle Sal folded his hands together and leaned forward. Is that not what you wanted? To live in another world and experience another life? He gave Tyler a challenging look. The alcohol dulled Tyler's speech, but he tried to come back with something witty. But I didn't expect to blow up the planet. A hiccup interrupted his flow, but he plowed on. I didn't expect to lose my family, my life, my soul. He hiccuped again. My son. Uncle Sal looked concerned. Didn't you learn anything from our last meeting? Life is not perfect. It is messy and often involves pain and suffering. He paused, looking at the people, staring. But it also contains wonder and joy and new life. He emphasized the last part, and Tyler understood his point. What good is creating new life if you are not there to enjoy it? His drunken yelling got the policeman looking again, and he was conferring with the waitress. Tyler ignored them. Uncle Sal considered his response. I understand, Tyler. I too have created many worlds and then left them to grow on their own. They have grown into wonderful worlds, worlds that embrace all the universe has to offer. Why can't you embrace it? I don't want to embrace the universe, he spat angrily. My problem is the universe. He stood up from the booth and yelled down at the shocked Uncle Sal. The universe is what created me and made my life a living hell. I didn't want this. He gestured wildly. I don't want this. Why can't you understand that? He wobbled on his feet. He slammed his hand on the table just as the policeman came to their table. Okay, buddy. Let's calm down. I'm sure we don't need to upset all the patrons. Tyler watched as the policeman moved slowly, his hands outstretched. Can't we just go outside and talk about this in private? Tyler stood up straight and nearly fell down from the alcohol. Calm down, you say? You're not even real. He turned around wildly, barely able to stand. None of you are real. You're just this 348 Admiral's ghost man's imagination. He pointed at Uncle Sal, who looked sad, but said nothing. Okay, the policeman said calmly. We are all not real, but why don't we go outside anyway? Hands held out. He inched closer to Tyler, who rocked back and forth, dizziness threatening. Tyler reached for the back of the booth next to him, the occupant moving as far away as possible, frightened by Tyler's outbursts. Yeah, he thought. Beware the crazy man. I am the possessor of bodies, the demon in the night, the destroyer of worlds. He liked the sound of those titles. That's what he had become, a demon. He felt the strength waver in his legs and began to fall. The policeman took the opportunity to move in and grab Tyler. Tyler tried to fight him off, but his strength waned through his haze. The policeman tried to wrestle Tyler to the floor, but Tyler used his last ounce of strength for a move the Admiral had learned when a young officer. It flipped the policeman onto his back, and in one swift movement, Tyler had removed his revolver. Like a madman, he held out the gun towards the stunned policeman laying on the floor, a look of disbelief and fear on his face. Tyler backed to the rear of the diner, patrons moving out of his way. He loved the feel of the power he held, the power to hurt and cause pain. That's right, he thought. Back off from the crazy demon man. I am the one who causes great pain. He backed against the counter, everyone's attention riveted on him. He looked around, flashing an evil smile. He briefly locked eyes with Uncle Sal, but the god only stared back with pity. This made Tyler's anger erupt. He pointed the gun into the air and let out a blood-curdling scream containing all the anguish he'd held inside. With tears pouring down his face, he placed the gun to the side of his head and pulled the trigger. Instantly, he felt the familiar rush as his spirit exited the body. He was sober again and plunged into silence. In an instant, Tyler transitioned to a galaxy far from Thosolan and far from Polto. It was a place he knew nothing about, but it came unbidden to his tortured mind. In a blink, the diner and its stunned patrons disappeared, replaced by the silent blackness of space. Once again, Tyler was alone, adrift in the universe.